Hey everyone, how many times a day do you check your phone? Check your feeds? We share so much online, right? It connects us, lets us see what friends are up to, maybe even meet new people. But sometimes, that connection can take a really dark turn. It's easy to forget that not everyone online is who they seem, and sometimes, the interactions we have can lead to situations that are genuinely frightening. We've got a clip coming up that explores exactly that. It features real accounts, true stories, from people whose experiences on social media turned into actual nightmares. It's a stark look at the potential dangers that can hide behind a username. So, take a deep breath. Here are some true scary social media horror stories. My name is Olivia. At least, that's the name most people know me by online. In the brightly lit, sugar-dusted corners of Instagram, I'm at Live Bake Stuff, the face behind a moderately popular baking account. It's my little slice of the internet, a place where I can share my passion. Mostly, it's just pictures, towering layer cakes draped in glossy ganache, meticulously decorated sugar cookies for every conceivable holiday, the occasional rustic loaf of bread, steam still curling from its crust. Nothing too personal, you understand. It's about the craft, the alchemy of flour, sugar, butter, and eggs transforming into something beautiful, something delicious. It's about the perfect swirl of buttercream, the satisfying snap of tempered chocolate, the delicate lattice work on a pie. My face rarely makes an appearance, and details about my life outside the kitchen are deliberately kept vague. It's safer that way, I always thought. Easier to keep the trolls and the creeps at bay. My follower count hovers in the comfortable mid-thousands, enough engagement to feel rewarding, enough comments and DMs asking for recipes or praising a particular technique, but not so many that I feel overwhelmed or exposed. It felt manageable. It felt safe. Baking has always been my sanctuary. The rhythmic whir of the stand mixer, the precise measurements, the warmth radiating from the oven, it's meditative. My kitchen is my haven, a space where I'm entirely in control. The outside world, with all its chaos and unpredictability, fades away when I'm dusting flour onto my countertop or carefully piping intricate designs onto a cake. Sharing that joy online felt like a natural extension, connecting with others who understood the simple pleasure of creating something sweet with your own two hands. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, a pleasant hum of appreciation in the background of my life. Sure, there were occasional odd comments, the inevitable spam bots, but nothing that ever truly set off alarm bells. Until about a month ago. That's when Sweet Tooth Liam slid into my DMs. He was a new follower, no profile picture, just a generic gray avatar, and a bio that simply read lover of all things sweet. His first few messages were unremarkable, blending into the usual stream of compliments. Incredible piping skills on that floral cake. That chocolate chip cookie looks absolutely perfect. Standard stuff. Flattering, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary. I'd reply with a polite thank you, maybe an emoji, and move on. He was consistent, commenting or messaging on almost every new post, always complimentary, always focused on the baking itself. He seemed genuinely enthusiastic, maybe even another home baker. For a week or two, it was fine. Just another friendly interaction in the vast, anonymous space of the internet. Then, the tone shifted. It was subtle at first. The messages became slightly more frequent, a little more intense. Saw your latest post, Olivia. You really outdid yourself. The use of my actual name, clean perhaps from a stray comment I'd made months ago, or maybe my profile link, gave me a slight pause, but I brushed it off. People find names online easily enough. It wasn't that strange. But then came the message that made the blood drain from my face. It arrived late one evening, after I'd spent the afternoon testing a new recipe, lemon lavender macarons. I hadn't posted anything about it yet. The photos were still on my camera, the kitchen cleaned up, the lingering scent of citrus and floral notes the only evidence. I was curled up on my sofa, scrolling idly through my phone, when the notification popped up. It was from Sweet Tooth Liam. Love the blue apron you wore yesterday, Olivia. Really brings out your eyes. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The blue apron. It was my favorite, faded denim with a few stubborn flower smudges near the hem, a gift from my grandmother years ago. I had worn it yesterday. All afternoon, in fact, while wrestling with the finicky macaron batter. But I hadn't posted any pictures of myself wearing it. I hadn't posted any pictures from that baking session yet. I never posted pictures of myself in my kitchen unless it was a carefully staged shot for the feed, and even then, I rarely showed my face clearly. Yesterday, I was baking alone. Just me, the ingredients, the oven, and that old blue apron. There was absolutely no way anyone, let alone a random Instagram follower, could know I had worn it. My mind raced, desperately searching for a logical explanation. Did I accidentally upload a story showing a reflection? Did I mention it in a comment thread somewhere and forget? I scrolled frantically through my own feed, my stories archive, my recent comments. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It wasn't a lucky guess, it was too specific. The color, the fact I wore it yesterday. The compliment about my eyes, how could he even know their color? A cold dread, thick and suffocating, began to creep up my spine. This wasn't just an overly enthusiastic follower. This was something else. Something wrong. I didn't hesitate. My thumb hovered over his username, then slammed down on the block button. A small, almost pathetic sense of relief washed over me. Blocked. Gone. He couldn't message me anymore. I could pretend it never happened, dismiss it as a bizarre, unsettling fluke. I double-checked my privacy settings, made my account private for a few hours before convincing myself I was overreacting and switching it back. Maybe he'd just seen me through the window? No, my kitchen window faces my fenced backyard. Impossible. Maybe he hacked my account? Possible, but why reveal it with such a specific, non-public detail? The lack of answers was almost as terrifying as the message itself. I tried to push it down, telling myself the block was enough. He was just some creep, and I had shut him out. The fragile peace lasted less than 24 hours. The next day, while nervously checking my DMs, hoping for silence, a new message request popped up. The username sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Liam bakes better. The profile picture was still blank. The message was short, chillingly direct. Blocking me won't help, Olivia. My name again. The immediate knowledge that I had blocked his other account. And then, the line that shattered my remaining sense of security. By the way, you're almost out of vanilla extract. Better add it to your shopping list. My breath hitched. Vanilla extract. I was almost out. I'd noticed it the day before, while making the macarons, mentally adding it to my grocery list. The bottle sat in my pantry, tucked behind the flour canisters and sugar jars. It wasn't visible from the window, even if you could see in. It wasn't something I'd ever mentioned online. It was a mundane, private detail of my domestic life. How? How could he possibly know that? I scrambled off the sofa, stumbling towards the kitchen, towards the pantry. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Pulling it open, I scanned the shelves, my eyes landing on the small, dark brown bottle of vanilla extract. I snatched it up. Tilting it towards the light, I saw the liquid level. He was right. There was barely a teaspoon left, clinging to the bottom. The bottle felt cold in my hand, or maybe it was just me. The air in my kitchen, usually filled with the comforting aroma of baked goods, suddenly felt heavy, stagnant, thick with unseen eyes. I haven't baked since. The stand mixer sits unplugged on the counter, gathering a fine layer of dust. The measuring cups hang silently on their hooks. The thought of creaming butter and sugar, of kneading dough, now fills me not with joy, but with a paralyzing fear. My sanctuary has been breached. He saw the apron. He knows about the vanilla. He knows my name. He knows blocking him is useless. How? How does he know? The question echoes in the silence of my kitchen, a question I'm terrified to answer. The days following the vanilla extract message blurred into a monotonous cycle of anxiety. Sleep offered little escape, plagued by fragmented dreams of shadowy figures standing just outside my kitchen window, their faces obscured, their hands holding whisks that dripped something dark and viscous, not frosting. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, tangled in damp sheets, the silence of my apartment pressing in on me. The silence was the worst part. My home, once filled with the comforting hum of the refrigerator, the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock, the cheerful clatter of bowls and pans, now felt unnervingly quiet. The absence of the stand mixers were, the oven's gentle sigh, the sizzle of butter in a pan. It was a void, amplifying every tiny creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every settling groan of the building into something potentially sinister. My kitchen remained untouched, a monument to my fear. The vanilla bottle still sat on the counter where I'd left it after confirming its near-empty state, a stark reminder. Looking at my pristine and used equipment felt like looking at relics from a past life, a life where flour dust was a sign of happy productivity, not a potential surface for invisible fingerprints. I started eating takeout, bland sandwiches, anything that required minimal preparation and didn't involve lingering in the kitchen space that now felt contaminated by an unseen presence. The irony wasn't lost on me, the baker who couldn't bear to be in her own kitchen. Paranoia became my constant companion. I developed rituals. Checking the locks on my doors, front door, patio door, windows, not just once or twice, but 5, 6, 7 times before I could even think about relaxing, which I rarely could anyway. I drew all my curtains and blinds, plunging my apartment into a perpetual twilight state, even during the brightest part of the day. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The thought that he knew about the apron, the vanilla, it meant he had a vantage point. But where? How? I scanned the exterior of my building from the street, searching for cameras that weren't there, for windows that might offer an unlikely angle into my kitchen pantry. Nothing made sense. My online life underwent a similar lockdown. I changed passwords on everything, enabled two-factor authentication where I could, scoured my Instagram account yet again, deleting old posts that might inadvertently contain too much background detail, untagging myself from friends' photos. I felt a desperate need to erase myself, to become invisible online and off. But a chilling thought kept intruding. He already knew things that weren't online. He knew my name. He knew my baking habits. He knew the state of my pantry. Changing my digital footprint felt like closing the barn door after the horse hadn't just bolted but had circled back to whisper threats in my ear. For 3 agonizing days, there was silence from Liam Bakes Better. No new messages, no comments, nothing. Part of me desperately clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd gotten bored, moved on, that the vanilla message was his parting shot. But another, more dominant part of me knew better. This silence wasn't peace, it was anticipation. It was the tightening of a string, the pause before the strike. It felt calculated, designed to let my fear fester and grow in the quiet. I found myself compulsively checking my phone, my heart leaping at every notification, only for it to be a mundane email or a news alert. The waiting was its own form of torture. Then, on the 4th day, another message request appeared. Same username. My stomach plummeted. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was short, almost conversational, yet utterly terrifying. New curtains look nice, Olivia. Very beige. But sheer ones don't block much, do they? Especially at night when the lights are on. I stumble back from my phone, gasping for air. The curtains. I'd bought new, thicker curtains for the living room just 2 days ago, replacing the old, somewhat sheer ones. They weren't even beige, they were more of a light taupe, but close enough. He knew. He'd seen them. He'd seen me struggling to hang them, probably muttering curses under my breath. He knew I'd changed them specifically because of him, because of the fear he'd instilled. And the comment about them being sheer, was he implying he could still see through them? Or was it just a general observation meant to unsettle me further? The ambiguity was horrifying. He was watching me react to his terror. He was enjoying this. Who could I tell? The thoughts circled endlessly in my mind. My best friend, Sarah? My parents? What would I even say? There's a guy on Instagram. He knew I wore my blue apron. He knew I needed vanilla. Now he knows about my curtains. It sounded insane. I could already picture the concerned, slightly pitying looks. They tell me to block him. Done that. To report him. To whom? With what evidence beyond creepy but perhaps deniable messages? To be more careful online. I was careful. They wouldn't understand the bone-deep certainty I felt that this was more than just online harassment. This felt physical. Invasive. Real. Reporting it to the police felt even more daunting. What crime had technically been committed? Sending unsettling DMs? Knowing common household details? I had no proof of stalking, no threats of physical violence, just an overwhelming sense of being watched and known by a malicious stranger. I felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. My apartment, my supposed safe space, started to feel alien. Was that faint scratching sound just a building settling, or something in the walls, the attic? Did I leave that cupboard door slightly ajar, or had someone else been here? One evening, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and froze. Sitting perfectly centered on my otherwise spotless countertop was a single, perfect, red macaron. Not the lemon lavender ones I'd failed at making days ago. This was raspberry, flawless in its execution, with delicate, smooth shells and perfectly formed feet. It hadn't been there an hour ago. I lived alone. I hadn't baked in days. I hadn't bought any macarons. It just appeared. I didn't scream. A strange calm washed over me, the calm of absolute terror. Finally realized. He could get inside. Or he could make things appear inside. Which was worse? I stared at the macaron, its cheerful red color a grotesque mockery of the joy baking once brought me. It felt like a message. I can reach you anywhere. I know what you love. And I contained it. I backed away slowly, retreated to my bedroom, and locked the door, dragging a heavy dresser in front of it, knowing deep down it wouldn't make a difference if he could apparently materialize pastries in my kitchen. Sleep was impossible now. Every shadow seemed to lengthen and deepen, coalescing into a vaguely human shape in the periphery of my vision. The silence wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with phantom whispers, the imagined sound of footsteps just outside my door, the ghost of a camera lens glinting in the dark. My world had shrunk to the size of my fear, and the walls were closing in. He knew about the apron, the vanilla, the curtains. He could leave gifts, or warnings, on my counter. How much more did he know? What would he do next? The question wasn't just how does he know anymore. It was how close is he? That night, huddled behind the locked bedroom door with the dresser jammed against it, was the longest of my life. Every sound outside was magnified, twisted by fear into undeniable proof of his presence. The groan of pipes became footsteps in the walls. The wind rattling the window pane became fingers tapping, testing the glass. The refrigerator cycling on in the kitchen sounded like a low, menacing hum, an alien device monitoring me. I didn't sleep. I listened, straining my ears in the oppressive darkness, clutching my phone like a useless talisman. The cheerful red macaron sat on the kitchen counter, a tiny, edible bomb ticking down the seconds of my sanity. When the first gray light of dawn finally filtered through a gap in the curtains, it wasn't relief I felt, but a grim resolve. Hiding wasn't working. Waiting was torture. I had to do something. Carefully, silently, I pushed the dresser aside and unlocked the door. The apartment was still, silent. The macaron remained exactly where I'd last seen it. Armed with a pair of disposable gloves I usually use for handling food coloring, I picked it up. It felt obscenely light, almost fragile. Without examining it further, I dropped it into the kitchen bin, burying it under coffee grounds and vegetable peelings. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Then, fueled by a mixture of terror and adrenaline, I went back to my phone. I opened Instagram, navigated to the profile of Liam Bakes Better, my thumb hovering over the message button. What could I possibly say? Threaten him? Plead with him? Accuse him? It all felt futile against someone who could apparently phase through walls. I settled on desperate simplicity. Leave me alone. How are you doing this? How did you get in my kitchen? I hit send, my heart pounding, half expecting an instant, chilling reply. Silence. For hours, nothing. The lack of response was almost worse than the messages themselves. It felt like he was savoring my fear, letting my question hang in the void. I spent the time pacing my small apartment, peering out through tiny gaps in the curtains, checking locks again and again. Finally, late in the afternoon, a notification pinged. It was him. My breath caught. The message read, "But Olivia, I just want to appreciate your baking." Up close. It's hard to capture the true artistry from just photos, you know? Did you like the macaron? Raspberry is your favorite, isn't it? Raspberry. He knew my favorite flavor. I'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, in passing comments months, perhaps years ago on some obscure food blog, long before my Instagram account even gained traction. Or maybe he knew it some other way. The implication sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. The casual intimacy, the feigned innocence coupled with deeply invasive knowledge, it was masterful psychological torment. This couldn't go on. I couldn't live like this. Despite my crippling fear of not being believed, I decided I had to try the police. The experience at the local precinct was deflating. I sat clutching printouts of the Instagram messages, the apron, the vanilla, the curtains, the macaron mention, his admission of wanting to appreciate my baking up close. The officer who took my statement was polite but detached. He listened patiently, nodding occasionally, his eyes betraying a practiced skepticism. "So, this Liam bakes better. You don't know who he is?" "No." "And he hasn't made any direct threats?" "Asked for money? Threatened violence?" "No, but he left a macaron inside my locked apartment." I insisted, hearing the desperation, the hint of hysteria, in my own voice. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "No sign of forced entry, you said?" "None." He sighed, tapping his pen. "Look, Ms. Olivia. Online harassment is serious, but without a credible threat or evidence of stalking beyond these messages and an unexplained pastry, there's not much we can officially investigate right now. It could be an elaborate prank. Someone you knew trying to scare you?" He suggested I file a report for documentation purposes, change my locks, again, enhance my online privacy settings, again, and perhaps install a security camera system. I left the station feeling more alone and vulnerable than ever, clutching a pamphlet on cyberstalking that felt woefully inadequate. He was right, technically. No forced entry. No explicit threat. Just creeping, impossible knowledge and a single raspberry macaron. Proof of nothing, yet evidence of everything. Defeated, I returned home. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows across my living room. As I locked the door behind me, triple-checking the deadbolt, a faint sound made me freeze. A soft click, almost inaudible, from the direction of the ceiling near the hallway smoke detector. It wasn't the sound of the detector itself. I knew its chirps and beeps. This was different. Sharper. Mechanical. My blood ran cold. Slowly, heart hammering, I dragged a chair over. Standing precariously on it, I peered closely at the smoke detector casing. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. But then, My eye caught it, a tiny, almost invisible dark spot near the edge, where the plastic met the ceiling. It wasn't dust. It looked like a lens. A minuscule camera lens, expertly concealed. My breath hitched. I scrambled down, fetched a screwdriver with trembling hands, and climbed back up. Fumbling with the screws, I managed to pry the smoke detector cover off. And there it was. Tucked inside, wired discreetly into the detector's own power source, was a tiny camera, no bigger than my thumbnail, its lens aimed directly down the hallway, covering the entrance to my kitchen and living room. He hadn't phased through walls. He hadn't needed to. He had eyes inside. How long had it been there? Who could have installed it? A maintenance worker? Someone who'd had access before I moved in? Or Liam himself? The questions swirled, unanswered and terrifying. With a surge of violated rage, I ripped the camera out, wires snapping. I threw the smoke detector cover across the room, where it clattered against the wall. Holding the tiny, malevolent eye in my palm, I felt a tremor run through me. This was how he knew about the apron, the curtains, maybe even the vanilla if he had audio or could lip read from the right angle. This was his window into my life. I destroyed the camera, smashing it beyond repair. Then I searched the rest of my apartment with frantic energy, checking light fixtures, vents, other appliances, anywhere else something could be hidden. I found nothing else. But the relief was tainted. Had I found the only one? Or just the most obvious one? In the days that followed, the messages from Liam Bakesbetter stopped. Complete silence. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It was worse. Before, I knew he was watching, knew he was communicating. Now, there was only emptiness, uncertainty. Did removing the camera blind him? Or did he know I'd found it, and was now watching me in a different way, biding his time, planning something else? Had he already installed others I hadn't found? I still live in the same apartment. Moving felt like letting him win, and besides, where would I go that felt truly safe? But it's not a home anymore. It's a place I check obsessively for hidden lenses, where every shadow feels like a potential hiding spot, every creak a footstep. I haven't logged back into it live-baked stuff. The stand mixer remains draped in a shroud of dust. The joy of baking, the simple pleasure of creating something sweet, has been irrevocably poisoned, replaced by a bitter aftertaste of fear. I blocked Liam Bakesbetter, of course, but I know blocking doesn't help. He's still out there. Maybe he's watching me right now, through means I haven't discovered yet. Maybe the silence is the real threat. The vanilla extract is still almost empty. I haven't had the art to buy more. Every time I even glance towards the pantry, I feel his eyes on me, and I wonder when the silence will break. My name is Noah, and like countless others navigating the murky waters of modern dating, I often found myself mindlessly swiping through Tinder late at night. It was a habit born more out of boredom and a vague, persistent loneliness than any real expectation of finding the one. Most nights, it was a parade of heavily filtered photos, bios filled with cliches about loving travel and hating drama, and conversations that fizzled out faster than cheap champagne. Tuesday night started no differently. The blue light of my phone painted my otherwise dark bedroom in an eerie glow as my thumb flicked left, right, a monotonous rhythm accompanying the drone of some true crime documentary I wasn't really watching. Then I matched with Emma. Her profile wasn't flashy, which was honestly a point in her favor. Just a few seemingly candid photos, smiling at a cafe, hiking with friends, faces strategically blurred, a common courtesy, holding a slightly bewildered-looking cat. She was cute, undeniably, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuine, not forced for the camera. Her bio was short and sweet, lover of books, coffee, and rainy days. Looking for someone genuine. No games, please. Generic, sure, but refreshingly straightforward compared to the cryptic one-liners or exhaustive lists of demands I often encountered. We started chatting. It flowed easily, surprisingly so. We skipped the awkward hey phase and jumped into shared interests, a mutual love for a slightly obscure indie band, debates about the best pizza toppings, pineapple belongs, fight me, and Tu Chow complaining/joking about the absurdity of online dating itself. She had a dry wit that matched mine, and her replies were quick and thoughtful. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of actual interest, a spark of connection that went beyond the superficiality of the app. Hours melted away, the documentary long forgotten, replaced by the tap of my messages and the satisfying ping of her responses. Just as I was contemplating suggesting we meet up for coffee sometime that week, a new message popped up from her. Hey, this might be forward, but would you be up for a quick video call? Just want to make sure you're not a 60-year-old catfish named Stan, lol. I chuckled. It was a bit forward, but her reasoning was sound. God knows I'd heard enough horror stories, and probably featured in a few minor ones myself if I was being honest about my older photos. Haha, fair enough, I typed back. Stan the Catfish Man, at your service. But yeah, a video call sounds good. When works for you? How about now? She replied instantly. If you're free. My room was a mess, clothes draped over the laundry chair, empty coffee mugs scattered on my desk, remnants of a late-night snack. Hardly the ideal backdrop. Ah, sure, I typed, scrambling to clear a vaguely presentable corner of my desk and trying to smooth down my hair in the reflection of my dark phone screen. Just give me 2 secs to not look like I just rolled out of bed, even though I kinda did. Ha, no worries. No judgment here, she sent back, followed by the video call icon popping up on her chat screen. I took a deep breath, tapped accept, and waited for the connection. My heart was doing a weird little fluttery thing, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The screen flickered, then resolved into her face. She looked exactly like her pictures, maybe even prettier in motion. Her brown eyes seemed whiter, perhaps with a touch of nervousness that mirrored my own. She offered a slightly shy smile. Hey, Noah. Hey, Emma. See? No Stan here, I joked, trying to break the initial awkwardness. She laughed, a pleasant sound. Good to know. We talked. Or rather, we tried to. The easy flow of our text conversation didn't quite translate to the video call. There were more pauses, moments where we both started talking at the same time, then apologized. Standard video call hiccups, I told myself. But something felt off. It was her background, or lack thereof. While my side of the call showed the cluttered reality of my room, hers was just white. A plain, stark white wall, devoid of pictures, furniture, or any distinguishing features. It was unnervingly blank, like a void. It made her look strangely isolated, floating in a featureless space. "Interesting decorating choice," I commented, trying to sound casual. "Going for the minimalist vibe?" She glanced quickly over her shoulder, a flicker of something. Confusion? Fear? Crossing her face before it was replaced by a neutral expression. "Oh, yeah. Just moved in. Haven't really had time to put anything up yet." It sounded plausible enough, yet the way she said it felt rehearsed. We steered the conversation back to safer territory: movies, music, complaining about work. But I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. The stark white wall seemed to press in on her, and her initial nervousness hadn't faded. If anything, it seemed to intensify as the call went on. Her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes, and her gaze kept flicking away from the camera, not just to the side, but slightly upwards and behind her, as if checking on something just out of her own line of sight. Then I saw it. Or thought I saw it. She had her phone propped up against something on a surface in front of her, angled slightly upwards. In the dark, reflective surface of her phone screen, distorted by the angle and the low light, I caught a flicker of movement in the space behind her. It was indistinct, a shadowy shift against the white wall reflected in miniature. A trick of the light? Pixelation from the video compression? My own eyes playing tricks on me after staring at a screen for hours? I blinked, leaned closer, trying to get a better look, but it was gone. Just the reflection of the white wall. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, noticing my shift in focus. "Yeah, sorry," I mumbled, shaking my head. "Thought I saw a bug on my screen. Lag, maybe." I tried to dismiss it. Bad connection. Weird lighting. My imagination running wild thanks to too many creepypastas and true crime docs. But the seed of unease had been planted, and it was starting to sprout. I found myself watching a reflection on her screen more than her actual face. The conversation became secondary, background noise to my increasingly paranoid surveillance. Was that another flicker? Did her eyes just dart back again? Why was she holding her body so rigidly? The plain white wall no longer seemed minimalist. It seemed sterile, unnatural, like a room in an institution or a hastily constructed set. The silence in her background was absolute. No traffic noise, no house sounds, nothing. We talked for maybe 10 minutes in total, though it felt longer, stretched thin by the underlying tension I felt. The conversation was winding down, the pauses growing longer. "Well," I said, trying to inject some normalcy back into the interaction, "it was great putting a face to the name, Emma. Definitely not Stan." She forced a smile, but it was brittle, fragile. "Yeah, you too, Noah." Her eyes, however, weren't looking at me. They darted nervously, unmistakably, over her shoulder towards the empty white space behind her. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. And in that split second, as her gaze flickered back towards the camera, her phone must have shifted slightly. The angle changed. For one horrifying, crystal-clear moment, the reflection on the dark screen wasn't just a distorted white wall. Reflected in miniature, perfectly framed, was a face. It wasn't Emma's. It was a man's face. Pale, gaunt, with sunken eyes that seemed to bore directly into mine through the double reflection. His mouth was a thin, tight line. He wasn't moving, just staring. Staring at me. The image was sharp, undeniable, burned onto my retina in that fraction of a second before Emma's hand hastily reached forward, blocking the screen. The call ended. Abruptly. Not a polite bye, just the connection severed, returning me to the chat screen, the video call icon now showing call ended 11 minutes and 32 seconds. I sat there, phone still in my hand, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My own reflection stared back at me from the dark screen, wide-eyed, pale. The gaunt face from her reflection felt superimposed over my own. Stan the catfish man? No. This was infinitely worse. I blinked, trying to clear the image, but it lingered. The stark white wall. Emma's terrified eyes. And that face. That pale, gaunt face, staring from the void behind her. My fingers trembled as I tapped on her profile picture in the chat. User not found. Her profile, the easy conversation, the cute photos, Emma herself, all vanished. Gone, as if they had never existed. Leaving only the chilling echo of that reflected face and the deafening silence of my own room. The silence in my room was absolute, broken only by the frantic thumping in my chest and the low hum of my computer fan. User not found. The words pulsed on my phone screen, stark white against the dark theme of the app. Gone. Just like that. The entire conversation history, her profile, the pictures, the witty banter, erased. It was as if Emma, the girl I'd spent hours talking to, the girl with the nervous smile and the terrifying reflection, had been a ghost in the machine all along. But I knew what I saw. That face. Gaunt, pale, eyes like empty sockets staring through the phone at me. It wasn't a glitch, wasn't lag. It was real. And Emma's reaction, the fear in her eyes, the way she frantically ended the call, the immediate disappearance of her profile, confirmed it. She wasn't a catfish, she was in trouble. Or worse. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragmented clues. The plain white wall. Her rehearsed answers. The constant nervous glances over her shoulder. The absolute silence on her end of the call. It wasn't a newly rented apartment, it felt like a cell, a soundproof room designed to keep something, or someone, in, and the outside world out. And the man in the reflection, was he her captor? Was he forcing her to do this? Luring people in via dating apps? For what purpose? The possibilities chilled me to the bone. I threw back my duvet, the sudden movement feeling jarring in the stillness. I needed to do something, but what? Call the police. What would I even say? Yes, officer, I was video chatting with a girl from Tinder, and I saw a spooky face reflected in her phone screen, and then her profile disappeared. They'd laugh me off the line, tell me to lay off the horror movies. I had no proof, no last name, no location, nothing but a vanished profile and a terrifying image seared into my memory. Frustration and a rising tide of fear washed over me. I felt helpless, useless. This girl, Emma, whoever she really was, had reached out, maybe inadvertently shown me something she wasn't supposed to, and now she was gone. And that face, it felt personal, the way it stared directly at me. Was I just a random target, or was there something more? My fingers trembled as I navigated back through Tinder, swiping aimlessly, hoping against hope that maybe it was a glitch, that her profile would reappear. Nothing. I tried searching variations of her name, Emma, M-E, combined with keywords from her bio, books, coffee, genuine. Still nothing. It was like trying to find a specific grain of sand on an endless beach. I paced my room, the bare floorboards cold beneath my feet. The true crime documentary I'd abandoned earlier now seemed sickeningly relevant. How many stories started like this? An online connection, a seemingly innocent interaction, then silence. I looked around my own cluttered room, suddenly feeling vulnerable. The blue light from my phone, usually a comforting presence in the dark, now felt like a beacon, potentially exposing me. Had he seen my room? Could he figure out where I was? Unlikely, but the paranoia was a cold knot in my stomach. I needed more information. Think, Noah, think. What did I actually know? Her first name was Emma, allegedly. She liked an obscure indie band. Which one? I couldn't remember the name. She thought pineapple belonged on pizza, a woman of taste, potentially held captive. It was pathetic. I knew practically nothing concrete. Wait. The pictures. Did I happen to screenshot her profile? I frantically checked my phone's gallery, scrolling through months of memes, photos of my cat, and random screenshots. Nothing. Why hadn't I taken a screenshot? It was dating 101. But the conversation had flowed so easily, felt so normal until it wasn't. What about the video call itself? Was there any record of it? I checked my phone's call log, only regular calls listed. I dove into the Tinder app's settings, looking for any kind of activity log or history. Nothing beyond my matches and basic settings. It was designed for fleeting connections, for plausible deniability, for easy erasure. Maybe reverse image search? If her photos weren't unique, if they were stolen from someone else's social media, maybe I could trace them back to a real person. But I didn't have the photos anymore. They had vanished with the profile. It was a digital dead end. Defeated, I sank onto my laundry chair, burying my face in my hands. The image of the gaunt face flashed behind my eyelids. Those eyes. Dead, yet intensely focused. Staring. Always staring. Was he still watching somehow? Had the video call been a one-way mirror? I stood up abruptly. I couldn't stay here. The silence was too loud, my thoughts too dark. I needed air, needed distance. I pulled on a hoodie and jeans, grabbed my keys and wallet, and headed out into the night. The cool air hit my face, a welcome shock after the stale atmosphere of my room. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, and every flicker in my peripheral vision made me jump. I walked aimlessly through the quiet suburban streets, phone clutched tightly in my hand. I kept reopening Tinder, refreshing it obsessively. Still nothing. I scanned the windows of the houses I passed, half expecting to see a pale, gaunt face looking back at me. It was irrational, I knew, but the fear was primal, deep-seated. What if Emma wasn't her real name? What if the entire profile was a fabrication, a carefully constructed lure? Maybe the man was the one operating the profile, using the girl's pictures as bait. Maybe the girl in the video wasn't even the same one from the photos. My head spun with possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. I found myself near a 24-hour coffee shop, its bright fluorescent lights spilling onto the dark pavement like a small island of artificial normalcy. I went inside, the smell of burnt coffee and disinfectant cleaner oddly comforting. I ordered the largest coffee they had, needing the caffeine, the heat, something to hold on to. Sitting at a small table in the corner, I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't open Tinder. I opened my web browser and typed in the few details I had: Tinder disappearance, video call white room, man reflected in screen creepypasta. The search results were a predictable mix: articles about online dating dangers, generic safety tips, links to actual creepypasta forums, and sadly, real stories of people who had gone missing after meeting someone online. I scrolled through forum threads, reading stories that echoed elements of my own experience: strange video calls, disappearing profiles, unsettling encounters. Most were dismissed as hoaxes or glitches, but some felt chillingly real. Were there others? Had this happened before? Was there a pattern? One post on a lesser-known forum caught my eye. It was dated 6 months prior. The user, writing anonymously, described a Tinder video call with a girl. Plain background, nervous demeanor, and then a brief glimpse of someone else in the reflection before the call abruptly ended and the profile vanished. The details were eerily similar, though the user didn't mention seeing the face as clearly as I had. They described it more as a tall, shadowy figure. There were only a few replies, mostly skeptical. But reading it sent a fresh wave of chills down my spine. It wasn't just me. This had happened before. Emma wasn't the first. And the gaunt man in the reflection wasn't just a random captor. He was a predator. And he was using Tinder as his hunting ground. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter in my mouth. I wasn't just a witness to something horrible. I was potentially the latest contact of a serial predator, and the face I saw wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. He knew I'd seen him. That realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, colder and more paralyzing than the lukewarm coffee or the late-night chill. It wasn't just some random, passive reflection. That stare, direct and unwavering even through the distorted medium of a phone screen reflection, felt intentional. He hadn't just been caught on camera, he had looked at the camera. At me. He knew I was a witness. The coffee shop suddenly felt like a fishbowl, the bright lights exposing me. Every other patron, previously just background noise, now seemed like a potential observer. Was someone watching me right now? Reporting back? The anonymous forum post mentioning a tall, shadowy figure took on a new, sinister meaning. Maybe the user hadn't gotten as clear a look, or maybe the predator hadn't realized he'd been seen that time. But with me, it was different. I saw his face. And he saw me seeing him. I practically bolted from the coffee shop, leaving my half-finished drink behind. The walk back to my apartment was a blur of heightened senses and suffocating paranoia. Every car that passed too slowly, every shadow that seemed to stretch unnaturally long, every rustle in the bushes felt like a direct threat. I fumbled with my keys at my apartment door, my hand shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the lock open. Once inside, I slammed the door shut, locking the deadbolt and sliding the chain across. It felt flimsy, inadequate. I rushed through the apartment, checking the window locks, peering through the blinds into the darkness outside. Nothing. Just the quiet suburban street, sleeping under the sickly orange glow of the streetlights. But the feeling of being watched didn't dissipate, it intensified, crawling under my skin. My own apartment, usually my sanctuary, now felt like a trap. The silence that had been unnerving before was now terrifying, amplifying every tiny creak of the building settling, every distant siren. I collapsed onto the couch, phone still clutched in my hand like a talisman. Should I call the police now? Tell them about the forum post? It still felt flimsy. I saw a scary face on Tinder, and then I found an anonymous forum post from 6 months ago describing something similar. It sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. They'd need more. They'd need proof I didn't have. And what if calling the police made it worse? What if he found out? The man in the reflection didn't seem like someone who would react well to being exposed. Emma's terrified face flashed in my mind. What had happened to her after the call ended? What happened to the person who wrote the forum post? The lack of follow-up was perhaps the most chilling part. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gaunt face, those dead eyes staring back. I stayed on the couch, phone brightness turned down low, endlessly scrolling through news articles, forums, anything related to missing persons or online dating crimes in my area, looking for any connection, any clue. Nothing matched perfectly, but the sheer volume of stories about encounters gone wrong was staggering. How many Emmas were out there? How many predators were hiding behind anonymous profiles and blank white walls? Hours crawled by. Dawn began to break, painting the edges of my blinds in shades of gray. Exhaustion warred with adrenaline, leaving me feeling jittery and hollowed out. Just as I was considering trying to get an hour or two of restless sleep, my phone buzzed. Not a text. Not a call. A Tinder notification. My blood ran cold. I hadn't opened the app since leaving the coffee shop. Hadn't swiped. Hadn't done anything. Hesitantly, I tapped the notification. It wasn't a new match notification, not exactly. It was one of those generic prompts Tinder occasionally sends out. Someone new is interested in you. Keep swiping to see who it is. Normally, I'd ignore it. But now, it felt different. Sinister. Was he reaching out? Testing me? Luring me back in? My thumb hovered over the app icon. Deleting it felt like the same thing to do. Sever the connection. Run. Hide. But what if that's what he wanted? What if Emma, or someone else, was still trapped, and this was the only tenuous link? Could I live with myself if I just walked away? And morbid curiosity, that dangerous human flaw, gnawed at me. I had to know. With trembling fingers, I opened Tinder. The familiar interface appeared, the stack of potential matches waiting. I swiped left automatically on the first few, my heart pounding. Then, I stopped. A new profile. No name listed, just an age. The pictures, my breath caught in my throat. They weren't of a person. The first picture was a stark, clinical photograph of a plain white wall. Identical to the one behind Emma. The second picture was blurry, indistinct, like a shadow moving quickly past the lens. The third picture was a close-up. A distorted reflection in what looked like the dark screen of a phone. It was pixelated, hard to make out clearly, but the shape was unmistakable. A gaunt face. Sunken eyes. Staring. The bio simply read, "Saw you." Panic seized me, cold and absolute. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. This was him. He wasn't just a predator hiding in the digital shadows. He was actively stalking me now. He knew I'd seen him, and he was letting me know. The message wasn't just "saw you," it was "I see you." I scrambled backwards on the couch, dropping my phone as if it were burning hot. It landed screen up on the carpet, the reflected face staring blankly at the ceiling. I stared at it, frozen. He was in the system. He was actively using the app not just to find victims, but to communicate, to terrorize. Then, a sound from outside my apartment door. A soft scraping noise, like something being slipped underneath. My heart leaped into my throat. I stayed completely still, barely breathing, straining my ears. Silence. Had I imagined it? Was the paranoia finally making me hallucinate? Slowly, cautiously, I crept towards the door. I knelt down, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by the overhead fluorescent lights. Nothing seemed out of place. But then my gaze drifted downwards, towards the floor directly outside my door. Lying on the worn hallway carpet was a small, folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. I hadn't heard the elevator, hadn't heard footsteps. Whoever left it was silent, stealthy. My mind screamed at me not to open the door, not to touch it. But I couldn't stop myself. The need to know overpowered the fear. Unlocking the deadbolt and chain felt like dismantling the last vestiges of my safety. I opened the door just a crack, reached out a trembling hand, and snatched the piece of paper. I slammed the door shut, locking everything again, my back pressed against the wood. My fingers shook as I unfolded the small square of cheap notebook paper. Inside, written in messy, blocky handwriting, were just 2 words. Look up. My blood turned to ice. Look up. Look up where? My eyes darted frantically around my apartment, the ceiling fan, the light fixtures, the top of the bookshelf. Then, instinctively, horrifyingly, my gaze snapped towards the window. Across the street, in the window of the house directly opposite mine, a curtain twitched. And behind it, illuminated briefly by the dawn light filtering through the gap, I saw him. Not a reflection this time. Pale. Gaunt. Staring directly at me. He raised a hand, slowly, and waved. Then the curtain fell back into place. He knew where I lived. He was watching me. The white room wasn't just a digital prison, it was somewhere close. And the face wasn't just on my phone anymore. It was outside my window. My name is Ava. It feels strange even writing that down now, like committing my identity to paper somehow makes me more real, more vulnerable. Maybe that's just the paranoia talking. It's been talking a lot lately, whispering corrosive little doubts into the quiet spaces of my life, spaces that used to feel safe. It all started, ridiculously enough, with an armchair. It wasn't a particularly special armchair. Old, yes. Comfortable in that lumpy, worn in a way that only years of use can achieve. It was upholstered in a faded floral fabric, a pattern of indeterminate blooms and shades of dusty rose and muted olive green against a background that might once have been cream but had surrendered to a vague beige. It had belonged to my grandmother, a piece of furniture that had migrated with me through 3 different apartments since she passed. It held memories, sure, the ghost of her sitting there knitting, the scent of lavender water she favored clinging stubbornly to the fibers despite my best efforts to air it out. But mostly, it was just big. Too big for my current living room, an awkward behemoth that dominated the small space and collected dust bunnies like trophies. I live alone. Have done for the past 5 years, since my last serious relationship ended with less of a bang and more of a slow, deflating sigh. I'd grown accustomed to the solitude, even started to cherish it. The freedom to leave dishes in the sink overnight, to watch terrible reality TV without judgment, to decorate, or in this case, declutter, exactly as I pleased. But living alone also comes with a low hum of vigilance, a constant awareness of locked doors and strange noises in the night. It's a trade-off, independence for a sliver of perpetual unease. So, the armchair had to go. I needed the space, mentally and physically. Maybe a little extra cash wouldn't hurt either, though it wasn't the primary motivation. I wrestled it into a position with decent lighting, snapped a few photos that probably made it look slightly better than it did in reality, and posted it on Facebook Marketplace. Vintage floral armchair needs a new home. I typed, adding the dimensions and the optimistic asking price of $50. Buyer must collect. The usual cascade of marketplace notifications followed. Is this still available? Followed by silence. Lowball offers, $20 cash today? Messages asking questions already answered in the description. I sighed, resigned to the familiar dance of online selling. It was Tuesday evening when he messaged. His profile picture was nondescript, a slightly blurry shot of a generic landscape, maybe a sunset over a lake. No mutual friends. His name was Michael. Simple, common. Hi Ava, the message read. I'm interested in the armchair. Is the $50 asking price firm? It was direct, polite. A refreshing change. Hi Michael, I typed back. Yes, the price is firm. It's quite sturdy, just needs a bit of space. Great, he replied almost instantly. I'll take it for $50. When would be a good time to collect? Eager. Maybe a little too eager? I pushed the thought away. Someone willing to pay the asking price without haggling and pick it up promptly was exactly what I wanted. Still, the flicker of caution, the one that comes standard with living alone, sparked. A stranger coming to my home. Would this evening work for you? I asked, figuring it was better to get it over with quickly. Less time to dwell, less time for him to potentially change his mind. Say, around 7:30 p.m.? Perfect, came the immediate reply. Could you send me the address? This was the moment of hesitation. Giving out my address always felt like peeling back a layer of security. I glanced around my small, cozy living room. It was tidy enough. Nothing overtly personal on display, besides the general evidence of my life. Books stacked on shelves, a couple of potted plants, a throw blanket draped over the sofa. Standard stuff. I took a breath. I needed the chair gone. Sure, I replied, and typed out my street address and house number. It's a small gray house with a white front door. Just message me when you're a few minutes away so I can expect you. Will do. See you then, he confirmed. The next hour or so passed in a state of low-grade anxiety. I busied myself, wiping down the armchair one last time, clearing a path from the living room to the front door. I checked my phone repeatedly. Was it weird he didn't ask for more pictures? Or haggle at all? Most people did. Maybe he just really liked vintage floral patterns. Or maybe he just needed an armchair, any armchair, quickly. I tried to rationalize his eagerness, painting him as efficient rather than potentially odd. At 7:28 p.m., my phone buzzed. Michael, turning onto your street now. My heart gave a little jump. Right on time. Punctuality was a good sign, wasn't it? Normal people were punctual. I unlocked the front door, leaving the security chain off for now, and peered through the peephole. A dark, slightly beat-up sedan pulled up to the curb. A man got out. Average height, average build, dark hair, wearing jeans and a plain gray hoodie. Nothing remarkable. Nothing threatening. Just ordinary. I opened the door as he walked up the short path. Hi, Michael. Ava? Hi, he said. His voice was quiet, soft-spoken. He offered a brief, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His eyes, they seemed watchful, taking everything in, but not in a curious way. More like cataloging. Thanks for this. It's exactly what I was looking for. He gestured towards the armchair, which was visible just inside the doorway. No problem, I said, trying to sound breezy. It's just through here. It's a bit heavy. Might need 2 people to angle it out the door. Should be all right, he murmured, stepping inside. He barely glanced at me, his attention fixed on the chair. He moved towards it, assessing the angles. I stood back, feeling awkward, redundant in my own home. He gripped one side, tested the weight. Yeah, I can manage. He began maneuvering it, surprisingly adeptly, towards the doorway. It was a tight fit, requiring some careful turning. I hovered uselessly, asking if he needed help, but he just shook his head slightly, concentrating. As he got it wedged halfway through the door frame, one arm inside the house, one out on the porch, he paused. He stopped wrestling with the bulk of the chair and slowly turned his head, looking back past me, into the depths of my small living room. His gaze lingered for a moment, sweeping across the space. Nice setup, he said, his quiet voice cutting through the evening air. Cozy. I forced a tight smile. Thanks. Just get the chair out, I thought. Just pay and leave. He didn't move. His eyes continued their slow scan. Then they stopped, focused somewhere beyond my line of sight, towards the back of the house. You should really lock that back window, though, he said conversationally, his tone still soft, almost casual. Easy access. He turned back to the chair then, gave it a final heave, and shuffled it out onto the porch. But I barely registered it. His words echoed in the suddenly silent room. That back window. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. A cold dread, sharp and sickening, seized my chest. The back window he was referring to, it wasn't visible from the front door. It wasn't visible from the street. It looked out onto my small, fenced-in backyard. There was absolutely no way he could have seen it from where he stood, or from his car, or from the path. No way at all. How did he know about it? How did he know if it was locked or unlocked? He straightened up on the porch, reached into his pocket, and pulled out 2 20s and a 10. He held them out to me. I took the money numbly, my fingers stiff and cold. He just smiled again, that same unsettlingly blank smile. Then, without another word, he gripped the armchair firmly and started hauling it down the path towards his car. I watched him go, rooted to the spot inside my doorway, the $50 crumpled in my fist. The rational part of my brain scrambled for an explanation. Had he walked around the house before knocking? No, I would have heard him on the gravel path. Had he seen a reflection? Impossible angle. Had a neighbor mentioned it? Why would they? He loaded the chair into his trunk, which seemed almost miraculously large enough to hold it, slammed it shut, got into his car, and drove away. The moment his taillights disappeared around the corner, I slammed my front door shut, bolted it, and fumbled with the security chain, my hands shaking violently. Then, I sprinted through my small house, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached the back window, the one overlooking the small, shadowed patch of grass and the tall wooden fence. The lock, a simple latch, was fastened. Secure. But the fact that it was locked offered zero comfort. He knew about the window. He knew it existed, knew its location, and knew enough to comment on its security. The only way he could know that was if he'd seen it before. From inside my fenced yard. Or maybe even from inside my house. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. I checked the back window lock. And the front door. And the other windows. Again. And again. Every hour on the hour. The cozy little house that had been my sanctuary now felt like a glass box, exposed and vulnerable. And the quiet stranger named Michael, who just wanted an old armchair, had become the architect of my fear. He knew about the window. And I had no idea how. That first night after Michael left was the longest of my life. Sleep wasn't just elusive, it was a taunting impossibility. Every familiar sound of my house settling became amplified, twisted into something sinister by my raw nerves. The groan of the water pipes was footsteps in the walls. The rustle of leaves against the siding was the scrape of fingers on glass. The wind whistling around the eaves became a low, menacing whisper. I lay rigid in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, straining to hear past the frantic drumming of my own heart. The image of Michael's quiet, watchful eyes, his blank smile, and those chillingly casual words about the back window played on a loop in my mind. Easy access. Every hour, like clockwork, I'd slide out of bed, my feet silent on the cool floorboards. I'd creep through the house, a ghost in my own home, checking the locks. Front door, bolted, chain secured. Kitchen window, locked. Bathroom window, locked. And finally, the back window. My hand would tremble as I reached for the latch, confirming it was still fastened. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, peering out into the impenetrable darkness of the fenced yard, searching for shapes, for movement, for anything that didn't belong. There was never anything there but shadows and the vague outlines of the fence and the straggly bushes. But the absence of evidence wasn't reassuring. It just meant he was good at hiding. Or that he wasn't there right now. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones, a heavy, leaden weight. Sunlight streamed in, painting cheerful patterns on the floor, but it felt like a mockery. How could the world look so normal when everything felt so fundamentally wrong? I made coffee, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. As I waited for it to brew, I tried desperately to rationalize. Maybe Michael had taken a quick peek around the back before knocking. Could he have slipped through the side gate? I went outside, my coffee forgotten, and checked. The gate was old, warped wood, but it was latched from the inside. Could someone have reached over? Possibly, but it was awkward, high up. And why would they? Just a glance at a window? It felt thin. Could it have been a reflection? I stood at the front door, trying to replicate his position. I craned my neck, squinted, looked at the ankles. There was no combination of light or position that could possibly reflect the back of the house towards the front entryway. The layout simply didn't allow it. A lucky guess, then? A 1 in a million shot. You should lock your back window. Maybe it was just generic home security advice. But he hadn't said a back window. He'd said that back window, gesturing vaguely towards it, knowing its location relative to the living room. No, it wasn't generic. It felt specific. Targeted. My hands were shaking again. I needed to know more about him. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I opened Facebook and searched for Michael, who had messaged me from Marketplace. I scrolled through my message history, found our conversation. His profile picture, the blurry landscape, was still there. I clicked on it. His profile was barren. Almost unnervingly so. No friends list visible. No posts. No photos other than the generic landscape header and profile picture. His About section was empty. It looked less like a real person's profile and more like a placeholder, hastily created and minimally populated. It told me nothing, except that he likely didn't want to be found or known. The chill returned, stronger this time. He wasn't just some random guy who liked vintage chairs. He was anonymous. Intentionally so. The following days bled into a week of heightened, exhausting vigilance. The feeling of being watched became my constant companion. When I was home, I kept the curtains drawn, even during the day, turning my cozy space into a dim, claustrophobic cave. Every creak from the floorboards above when I was downstairs, or from downstairs when I was upstairs, sent my heart leaping into my throat. Was it just the house? Or was someone else inside? I started double-checking rooms before I entered them, peering around doorways, my hand hovering near a heavy book or a potential makeshift weapon. Sounds outside became sources of terror. One evening, cooking dinner, I heard a distinct scrape sound from the backyard, near the window, like something dragging against the wooden fence. I froze, knife hovering over a cutting board, every muscle tensed. I waited, heart pounding, barely breathing. Silence. After a minute that felt like an eternity, I crept to the window, pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch and peered out. Nothing. Just the deepening twilight and the familiar shapes of the yard. Probably a branch falling, or a raccoon. Probably. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. Another time, I came home from a necessary grocery run, unlocking the front door. The deadbolt felt stiffer than usual, as if it had been recently forced or manipulated. I examined it closely. No scratches, no visible signs of tampering. Maybe I was just imagining it, my paranoia painting mundane friction as evidence of intrusion. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had tried the lock while I was out. Inside, things felt subtly wrong. A magazine on the coffee table seemed angled differently than how I'd left it. The salt shaker on the kitchen counter was closer to the edge than I remembered putting it. Tiny, insignificant details. So insignificant that I couldn't be sure. Was I losing my mind? Was the lack of sleep and constant anxiety making me misremember, making me manufacture threats where none existed? That was almost scarier, the thought that the danger wasn't external, but a product of my own unraveling mind. I thought about telling someone. My friend Chloe. She'd listen, but she'd likely tell me I was letting my imagination run wild. A creepy comment from a weirdo on Marketplace, Ava? Just block him and move on. Get a better lock if it makes you feel better. The police? What would I even say? A man who bought my armchair made a weird comment about my window. They'd laugh me out of the station. I had no proof, nothing concrete. Just a feeling, a deep-seated dread that had taken root and was slowly strangling my peace of mind. I was alone with this fear, trapped in the echo chamber of my own anxiety. The back window became the focal point of my obsession. I found myself drawn to it constantly, checking the latch, cleaning the glass obsessively as if wiping away potential fingerprints, scanning the small patch of yard beyond. I started researching security cameras online, comparing prices, reading reviews. Then I hesitate. It felt like such a drastic step. What if I installed one and it recorded nothing? Wouldn't that just prove I was being paranoid? Or worse, what if it recorded something? What would I do then? One night, unable to sleep yet again, I was standing at the back window around 2 a.m. The moon was hidden behind clouds, leaving the yard in near total darkness. I was just about to turn away when I saw it. Or thought I saw it. A flicker of movement near the back fence, a deeper patch of shadow detaching itself from the surrounding gloom, momentarily taking on a vaguely human shape before melting back into the darkness. I gasped, stumbling back from the window, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I flicked on the back porch light, flooding the yard with harsh yellow illumination. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just the fence, the bushes, the empty grass. Not even a stray cat. Was it him? Was it Michael, lurking just beyond my sightline? Or was it just another phantom conjured by sleep deprivation and terror? I didn't know. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. I went to the hardware store the next day and bought a heavy-duty security bar for the back window, the kind you wedge under the frame. It was a solid, physical barrier. But as I jammed it into place that evening, the flimsy sense of security it offered was immediately overshadowed by the chilling realization I was barricading myself inside my own home, a prisoner of a fear instilled by a quiet stranger and a single, impossible observation. The window was more secure, perhaps, but I felt more trapped than ever. Living with the security bar wedged against the back window didn't bring peace. It was a stark, ugly reminder clamped onto the frame, a physical manifestation of my fear. Every time my gaze drifted towards it, which was often, the cold dread returned. It wasn't a shield, it was a scar on my home, a constant testament to the fact that something external, something malevolent, had breached my sense of safety so profoundly that I now needed metal and wood to feel even marginally secure in my own space. The feeling of being trapped intensified. The bar kept things out, perhaps, but it also locked me in with my own terror. The subtle disturbances didn't stop. If anything, my hyper-awareness made them seem more frequent, though the paralyzing ambiguity remained. One morning, after a night of particularly heavy rain, I went to wipe condensation off the inside of the back window. My fingers froze mid-air. There, on the floor just beneath the window, was a single, drying smudge of mud. It was indistinct, barely more than a smear, but it was undeniably mud, and I knew I hadn't been gardening or walked through dirt the day before. I scanned my shoes by the door, clean. I checked the floors, spotless, apart from this one alien mark. Had a bit blown in under the sill during the storm? Possible. Had he somehow reached through a gap, leaving a trace? Impossible to say. I cleaned it up frantically, scrubbing at the floorboards as if trying to erase the possibility itself. I started receiving calls from an unknown number. No caller ID, just a known. The first time, I answered hesitantly. Silence. Just dead air, maybe the faint hiss of an open line. Hello? I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. Nothing. After about 10 seconds, the call disconnected. It happened again 2 days later. And then the next day. Always silence. Always disconnecting after a few moments. Was it him? A wrong number? A telemarketing glitch? There was no way to know, but each silent call felt like a deliberate act, a reminder that he could reach me, even electronically, anonymously. I stopped answering unknown numbers altogether, letting them go straight to voicemail, but the ringing itself became a source of anxiety. The breaking point came about 3 weeks after Michael had taken the armchair. It was a Thursday night, late. I'd finally drifted into an uneasy, shallow sleep, the kind where anxieties still swim close to the surface. I was jolted awake by a sound, not one of the usual house creaks or outdoor rustles. This was sharp, metallic. A distinct jiggle. It came from the back of the house. From the window. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart slamming against my ribs. Every nerve ending screamed. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Had I imagined it? Was it part of a dream? Then it came again. Jiggle, jiggle, scrape. Someone was tampering with the window lock from the outside, testing it. Fear, cold and paralyzing, held me immobile for a second. Then, pure, unadulterated adrenaline surged through me. Who's there? I yelled, my voice cracking, louder than I intended. Get away from my house. I'm calling the police. The jiggling stopped instantly. I strained my ears, listening over the blood pounding in my head. Faintly, almost imperceptibly, I heard it, the soft crunch of retreating footsteps on the grass outside, fading quickly into the night. I didn't call the police. Not yet. What proof did I have beyond a noise and footsteps I couldn't even be sure I'd heard correctly? Instead, I did what I always did. I got out of bed, my legs shaking, and crept towards the back window. I flicked on the porch light, bracing myself for what I might see. Nothing. The yard was empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow. The window was intact. The latch, visible through the glass, was still fastened. The heavy security bar I bought was still wedged firmly in place beneath the frame. Everything looked secure. Untouched. Relief warred with confusion. Had the bar deterred him? Had my shouting scared him off? Or had the entire event been a figment of my sleep-addled, terrified imagination? I spent the rest of the night huddled on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, watching the back window until the first gray hints of dawn appeared, feeling utterly exhausted and more vulnerable than ever. The next day, I almost convinced myself I had dreamt it. Almost. I went through the motions, work, remotely, thankfully. I dreaded leaving the house, forcing down some food, endless cups of tea. The constant hum of anxiety was my background noise. It wasn't until late afternoon, when the light hit the back window at a certain angle, that I saw it. The security bar. It wasn't quite wedged as tightly as I always left it. It looked notched, as if it had been removed and then replaced slightly carelessly. My breath hitched. I knelt, examining it closely. There was a small, fresh scratch on the painted windowsill, right where the end of the bar rested. A scratch I was certain hadn't been there before. He hadn't just tried the window. He hadn't just been scared off. The implication hit me with the force of a physical blow. He had gotten in. He had somehow bypassed the locked latch, dislodged the heavy security bar from the inside, and then, what? Stood in my house? Watched me sleep. And then, perhaps disturbed by my yelling, he had replaced the bar, locked the window again from the outside, if that was even possible, and left. The thought was infinitely more terrifying than a simple break-in. It wasn't about theft. It was about access, violation, psychological warfare. He could get in. He could get in, observe, and leave without a definitive trace, leaving me only with maddening hints and crippling self-doubt. He hadn't needed to take anything or harm me physically to destroy my peace of mind completely. That was the end, in a way. Not of the fear, but of any hope of normalcy. I didn't call the police. The evidence was still too circumstantial, too easily dismissed. But I couldn't stay there. Within a month, I had broken my lease, packed my belongings, minus one bulky armchair, and moved to a small, anonymous apartment complex on the other side of the city. 3rd floor, neighbors close on either side, multiple locks on the door. But the fear came with me. It's packed away in boxes I still haven't fully unpacked, lurking in the shadows of my new, unfamiliar rooms. I still check the locks compulsively. I jump at unexpected noises. I scrutinize every stranger, searching for quiet eyes and a blank smile. I avoid Facebook Marketplace like the plague. Sometimes, late at night, when the city sounds die down, I think about Michael. I wonder if he ever thinks about me. Was I just a random target? Did he do this to others? Or was there something specific about me, my house, that drew his attention? And how did he know about that window? Was he watching for days? Weeks? Had he been inside before? The questions circle endlessly, offering no answers, only feeding the lingering chill. I never saw Michael again. His Facebook profile vanished completely about a week after I moved. But sometimes I feel like I see him in crowds, a glimpse of a gray hoodie, a man of average height walking away, a quietness in someone's posture. It's never him, of course. Or at least, I tell myself it isn't. My name is Ava. I live alone. And I'm not sure I'll ever feel truly safe again. The armchair is gone, but the space it left behind has been filled with a permanent, unshakable dread. All because of a cozy setup, easy access, and a stranger who knew more than he should. My name is Elijah, and I suppose you could call me terminally online. It's not something I'm proud of, necessarily, but it's the truth. My days are a predictable cycle. Wake up too late, drag myself through a mind-numbing data entry job from the dubious comfort of my spare bedroom office, and then reward myself by dissolving into the infinite scroll. YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, but mostly, embarrassingly, TikTok. It's the ultimate brain drain, a relentless fire hose of 15-second distractions, perfectly engineered to hijack your dopamine receptors and make hours vanish like smoke. I spend way too much time on TikTok. My apartment is small, functional, and usually quiet, save for the ambient city hum filtering through the double-glazed windows. It's on the 3rd floor, nothing fancy, just a place to exist between work shifts and screen time. Most nights, like clockwork, I find myself bathed in the cool blue light of my phone long after I should have been asleep, thumb flicking through an endless stream of dances, comedy skits, life hacks I'd never use, and, inevitably, the trending sounds. That's where it started. With a sound. It wasn't even particularly original at first glance, just another piece of audio driftwood caught in the TikTok current. It was a lullaby snippet, maybe 5 or 6 seconds long, but horribly distorted. Imagine a classic, gentle melody, something like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or Hush, Little Baby, though the specific tune was mangled beyond recognition, played through a broken speaker submerged in water, then layered with static and a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate right in your teeth. It was grating, unsettling, viscerally wrong. Naturally, people were using it for horror-themed videos. Mostly cheap jump scares. You'd see a clip of someone walking down a dark hallway, or staring into a mirror, and right at the peak moment, bam, a distorted face would flash on screen accompanied by that jarring, corrupted lullaby. Typical stuff. Predictable, even. I must have scrolled past dozens of them over a few days. I'd watch a few, maybe flinch slightly at the jump scare if it was well-timed, sometimes let out a short, dismissive laugh at the absurdity of it all, and then scroll on. It was just another fleeting trend, another bit of digital noise in the overwhelming static of the internet. I didn't save the sound, didn't follow any creators using it specifically. It registered, made a minor impression of unpleasantness, and then, I thought, I forgot about it. Just another drop in the ocean of content I consumed daily. That night, the night it changed from a fleeting digital annoyance to something else, started like any other. Work, dinner microwaved and eaten over the sink, then the long, slow descent into the TikTok abyss. I remember scrolling for longer than usual, feeling that familiar numb fatigue mixed with the inability to just stop. The algorithm fed me the usual diet, some funny animals, a cooking video that made me hungry despite having just eaten, a few political rants I scrolled past immediately, and yes, probably a couple more videos using that damn distorted lullaby sound. I barely registered them. Eventually, sometime after 2 a.m., my eyes felt like sandpaper, and I finally tossed the phone onto the nightstand, plugged it in, and surrendered to sleep. Silence. That's what woke me. The profound, heavy silence that only seems to exist in the dead of night, somewhere between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. The city hum outside was muted. The usual creaks and groans of the apartment building were absent. It was the kind of quiet that presses in on your ears, making you acutely aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. I lay there for a moment, disoriented, unsure what had pulled me from sleep. My room was pitch black, save for the tiny red charging light on my phone. Then I heard it. It started faintly, so faintly I thought I might be imagining it, maybe a residual echo from the hours of scrolling still rattling around in my skull. But it persisted, growing just slightly louder, clearer. It was coming from downstairs, or rather, from the main living area of my apartment outside my bedroom door. It was the sound. The exact same distorted, creepy lullaby snippet from TikTok. Every note, every crackle of static, every grating undertone, identical. Not a similar sound, not a variation, but the precise audio file that had been bouncing around the internet. I froze. Utterly, completely frozen. My blood turned to ice water, prickling under my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the impossible sound drifting through the pre-dawn quiet. It wasn't loud, barely above a whisper, like someone was playing it on a phone speaker turned down low, but its presence was overwhelming. It felt alien, invasive. How could that specific digital sound be physically playing in my apartment? My mind raced, desperately seeking a rational explanation. Did my phone somehow start playing it? No, it was on the nightstand, silent, screen dark, charging light steady. Did I leave a laptop on? A tablet? Some other device? I never play audio out loud when I go to sleep. Did a neighbor play it? Unlikely. The sound was too close, seemingly originating from within my own space, and the walls weren't that thin. The sound played its full loop, those agonizing 5 or 6 seconds, maybe 3 or 4 times. Each repetition burrowed deeper into my fear. It felt deliberate, mocking. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. Silence crashed back in, heavier than before, thick with dread. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, straining my ears, every nerve ending screaming. Nothing. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. Slowly, cautiously, I forced myself to move. Adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. My hand fumbled for the heavy metal baseball bat I kept leaning in the corner of my room, a relic from a brief, ill-fated attempt at joining a softball league years ago, now repurposed as dubious home security. Gripping the cool metal, I slid out of bed, my bare feet making no sound on the carpet. Heart pounding in my throat, I crept towards my bedroom door, eased it open a crack, and listened. Still nothing. The living room beyond was a landscape of familiar shapes rendered strange and menacing by the deep shadows. Slowly, bat held high, I moved out of the bedroom. I checked the living room first. Phone chargers unplugged, laptop closed and cold, smart speaker dark and silent. Nothing. Kitchen next. Checked the microwave clock, 3:17 a.m., peered into the empty sink, glanced at the silent countertop appliances. Nothing. Bathroom empty. Spare bedroom/office, computer off, monitors dark. Nothing. I checked every window, locked. Checked the front door, double locked and bolted, exactly as I'd left it. There was nowhere for the sound to have come from. No device playing it, no open apps, no external source I could identify. It was as if the sound had simply materialized in the air, played its piece, and vanished. I spent the next hour wide awake, bat still in hand, perched on the edge of my sofa, jumping at every tiny creak of the building settling. The sky outside began to pale, shifting from inky black to bruised purple, then gray. The rational part of my brain kept trying to assert itself. Sleep paralysis, auditory hallucination, a weird dream fragment lingering after waking, stress. But the sheer specificity of the sound, its perfect replication of the TikTok audio, felt too real, too targeted. It hasn't happened again. Not since that one night. But something shifted in me. The fear didn't just evaporate with the morning light. It lingered, coiled in the pit of my stomach. Now, when I inevitably find myself scrolling TikTok and some unrelated video uses even a normal, innocent lullaby, or even just a slightly off-key music box sound, my stomach twists into a knot. My breath catches. I get a flashback to that 3 a.m. silence, broken by that impossible, distorted tune. The memory of the sound and the utter lack of explanation haunts the edges of my daily life. Was it just in my head? A stress-induced hallucination born from too much screen time and a creepy audio file? Or did something latch onto that sound? Did some unseen thing, drawn by that distorted melody echoing across the digital void, somehow follow it home? I scroll, and I listen, and I wonder. And I dread the silence of 3 a.m. The days following that night bled into one another with a strange, disjointed quality. On the surface, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I logged into work, typed meaningless data into spreadsheets, ate my bland meals, even forced myself through the motions of tidying the apartment. But underneath, a constant, thrumming anxiety had taken root. Sleep offered little escape. It was shallow, fractured, plagued by dreams I couldn't quite remember upon waking, but which left a residue of nameless dread, like cobwebs clinging to the corners of my mind. The silence of my apartment, once a neutral backdrop to my existence, now felt heavy, pregnant with possibility. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the heating system, every distant siren seemed amplified, potentially sinister. My relationship with TikTok became complicated. The app, my former mindless escape, now felt like a loaded gun. The compulsion to scroll was still there, deeply ingrained, a habit my brain craved. Yet, every time I opened it, my thumb hovering over the icon, a wave of cold apprehension washed over me. Scrolling felt different now. Less like passive consumption, more like peering into a dark room, unsure of what might be looking back. The distorted lullaby sound itself seemed to have faded from the main trends, replaced by newer, more ephemeral snippets of internet culture. But its absence was almost as unnerving as its presence had been. Had it ever really been as widespread as I remembered? Or had my focus on it magnified its significance? And the lullabies, Dear God, the lullabies. They were everywhere, or so it seemed. Gentle piano melodies in heartwarming videos, music box tunes in crafting tutorials, even snippets of classical pieces that brushed against that familiar cadence. Each time, without fail, my stomach would clench, my breath would catch, and a cold sweat would prickle my palms. It was an involuntary, visceral reaction, a phantom echo of the terror I felt that night. I'd slam my finger down to scroll past instantly, heart hammering, sometimes throwing the phone down as if it had burned me. Then the self-recrimination would begin. It's just music, Eli. Get a grip. It wasn't real. But the fear felt real. The memory felt real. Rationalization became my daytime coping mechanism. It had to be an auditory hallucination. Hypnagogia, maybe, those sensory experiences that can happen as you fall asleep or wake up. Combined with seeing that creepy sound repeatedly online, my tired, stressed brain must have just played a trick on me. Yes, that made sense. It was logical. It was comforting. Except it wasn't. The memory was too clear, too specific. The sound wasn't fading into dreamlike vagueness. It was crystalline in its horrifying detail, the exact distortion, the static, the gut-level wrongness of it, seemingly originating from my living room. And the timing, waking up first, then hearing it? That didn't quite fit the hypnagogia explanation I clung to. Unable to reconcile the logic with the lingering terror, I did what any terminally online person does when faced with the inexplicable. I turned to the internet for answers. Not just casual scrolling now, but targeted, obsessive searching. I started typing variations into search bars, heard TikTok sound in real life, distorted lullaby sound heard at night, auditory hallucination specific sound, TikTok sound manifestation. I plunged into Reddit forums dedicated to paranormal experiences, unexplained mysteries, and even creepypasta communities, searching for any mention, any parallel. The results were a frustrating mix of noise and near misses. Plenty of stories about hearing strange noises at night, plenty of discussions about the psychological effects of social media, countless threads about creepy sounds used in horror content. But nothing matched my specific experience. Nothing about that particular distorted lullaby manifesting physically after exposure online. I found generic tales of haunted houses, shadow people, sleep paralysis demons, unsettling, yes, but not my unsettling. Occasionally, buried deep within comment sections of obscure forums or old TikTok videos using the sound, I'd find a cryptic remark, heard this outside my window once, freaked me out, or this sound gives me weird vibes IRL. But they were fleeting, anonymous comments, devoid of detail or context, impossible to follow up on. Dead ends. Whispers in the digital dark. This fruitless searching only amplified my anxiety. Was I truly alone in this? Was I the only one whose digital consumption had seemingly bled into reality in such a specific, terrifying way? The thought was isolating, making me question my sanity more intensely. I started leaving the TV on low when I slept, needing some ambient noise to fill the silence, terrified of hearing that faint, distorted melody creep back into the quiet. I found myself compulsively checking my phone settings, disabling background app refreshes, turning off permissions, as if I could somehow digitally lock down my reality. Then came the glitches. Small things, at first. TikTok would freeze mid-scroll, not unusual in itself, but it seemed to happen more frequently now. Sometimes, the audio would desync, creating unsettling juxtapositions of sound and image. One afternoon, while scrolling numbly through my feed, the algorithm seemed to get stuck. For about 5 minutes, every single video it showed me, one after the other, inexplicably featured that specific distorted lullaby sound. Old videos, new videos, videos I'd definitely seen before, all using that grating tune. My blood ran cold. I force quit the app, my hand shaking. When I reopened it 10 minutes later, my feed was back to normal, a random mix of content. A server-side glitch? A bizarre algorithmic hiccup? Or something else? Something noticing my attention, my fear? I never heard the full sound again in the apartment. But sometimes, late at night, when the building was quiet and I was hovering in that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep, I'd hear fragments. A single distorted note, like a key being struck on that broken, submerged piano. A brief crackle of static from the corner of the room where there was no electronic device. Were they real? Or was my hypervigilant brain, primed by fear and lack of sleep, simply creating phantom noises? I couldn't be sure. And that uncertainty was, perhaps, the most terrifying part. I thought about telling someone, my one close friend, Sarah, maybe. But how would I even begin? Hey, Sarah, so I heard a scary tick-tock sound in my apartment at 3 a.m., and now I think the internet is haunted? I could picture her reaction, concern, probably, but laced with gentle skepticism, suggestions to maybe take a break from screens, get more sleep. She tried to be supportive, but she wouldn't understand. I'd sound crazy. The fear felt too intimate, too bizarre to be shared. So, I kept it locked inside, where it festered, twisting my perception of the world, making me view the technology one was so reliant on with a profound sense of mistrust and dread. The screen wasn't just a window anymore, it felt like a doorway. And I was terrified of what might be learning to use it. Weeks bled into months, each one dragging me further down into a spiral of sleeplessness and gnawing paranoia. My world shrank to the confines of my small apartment, and even that felt increasingly alien, hostile. Work became an impossibility, focusing on spreadsheets while every shadow seemed to pulse and every electronic hum felt like a prelude to that sound was beyond me. Emails went unanswered, deadlines evaporated. My savings dwindled, but the fear was a far more immediate currency. The minor glitches I'd experienced before became bolder, more personal. My phone screen would sometimes flicker, and for a split second, my reflection would distort, elongating, mouth stretching into a silent scream reminiscent of those jump scare faces. Targeted ads became nonsensical, often just displaying garbled text or static, punctuated by single, recognizable words like listen, behind, always. Once, during a rare video call attempt with Sarah, my voice strained and trembling as I tried to pretend everything was fine. She asked why my audio kept cutting out, replaced by what she described as a weird, high-pitched scratching noise. I ended the call abruptly, claiming a bad connection, my blood like ice. The feeling of being watched intensified from a background hum of anxiety to a constant, pressing weight. It was strongest when I was online, naturally, but it started to bleed into the physical world too. I'd catch movement in the periphery of my vision, a flicker of darkness darting past a doorway, a shape coalescing in the reflection of a window for just an instant before vanishing when I turned my head. Were these just tricks of a sleep-deprived mind, fueled by constant fear? Or was the barrier thinning? Then, one night, bathed in the cold glow of my laptop screen as I mindlessly scrolled through some random news aggregator. I couldn't bring myself to open TikTok anymore, but the lure of some screen was too strong. It happened. Not from one source, but from everywhere. The distorted lullaby. It erupted simultaneously from my laptop speakers, my phone, which was off, charging across the room, even the small Bluetooth speaker I hadn't used in months. It wasn't faint this time. It was loud, layered, a cacophony of that single, corrupted melody playing slightly out of sync from multiple points, filling the small apartment with a deafening, sanity-shredding wall of sound. I clamped my hands over my ears, screwing my eyes shut, rocking back and forth. It felt like an assault, a deliberate act of terror. It lasted for perhaps 30 seconds, an eternity of grating static and twisted notes, before cutting off as abruptly as it began, plunging the room back into a silence that felt somehow louder, more terrifying than the noise itself. My ears rang. My chest heaved. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a hallucination. This was an event. Something inside me snapped. The constant fear, the doubt, the isolation, it coalesced into a desperate, final surge of defiance. I wouldn't just sit here and wait for it to consume me. I focused on the device that had started it all, the portal through which this thing seemed to have first gained purchase, my phone. It lay on the nightstand, its screen dark, looking deceptively innocent. With a guttural cry, I lunged across the room, snatched the phone, ripped the charging cable out, and ran to the window. Fumbling with the latch, I threw it open, the cool night air hitting my face. Without a second thought, I hurled the phone with all my might towards the alleyway 3 floors below. I watched it arc downwards, catching a glint of streetlight before disappearing into the darkness, followed seconds later by a faint, unsatisfying clatter. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a new, sharper dread. Had I angered it? Would destroying the phone even matter? Was the device itself ever the point, or just a conduit? I slammed the window shut, locked it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. For a few days, an illusion of peace settled. The glitches stopped. The feeling of being watched lessened, though it never entirely disappeared. I slept marginally better, fueled by sheer exhaustion. Maybe, just maybe, I had severed the connection. The illusion shattered on the 4th night. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the familiar pre-dawn silence pressing in. Then, I heard it. Not from any device. Not from anywhere electronic. It was faint, horribly intimate. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. A scratching, rhythmic sound, punctuated by a low, guttural hum. And woven into it, barely audible but undeniably there, was the distorted lullaby. Not played, but hummed, scratched, breathed. It was organic, visceral, and utterly impossible. I didn't move. I couldn't. The terror was absolute, paralyzing. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It wasn't just digital. It was here. It had seeped through the screen, through the network, through the very fabric of my reality. Destroying the phone had done nothing. Maybe it had never been about the device. Maybe it was about the sound itself, a mimetic virus carried on trending audio, infecting susceptible minds, finding footholds in reality through our shared digital obsessions. That scratching, humming lullaby continued, seeming to crawl slowly along the inside of the wall beside my bed. I could almost feel the vibrations through my mattress. I closed my eyes, tears tracing hot paths down my temples. Was this it? Was this how it ended? Trapped in my apartment, listening to the impossible become real? I don't know how long I lay there, listening to the sounds in the wall. Eventually, the first hints of gray light began to filter through the edges of my blinds. The sound faded with the darkness, leaving only the ringing silence and my own frantic heartbeat. I am writing this now on an old, barely functional library computer. I left my apartment that morning with nothing but the clothes on my back and the cash in my wallet. I didn't look back. I don't know if the sound is still there, in the walls, waiting. I don't know if it's tied to me, or to that place, or if it's still spreading through the endless scroll, looking for new ears to catch, new minds to infect. Sometimes, walking down the street, I hear a snatch of music from someone's phone, or see a group of kids laughing at a video, and I freeze. Is that the tune? Is that the static? Every lullaby sounds like a threat. Every screen feels like a potential window for something terrible to peer through. So, be careful what you listen to online. Be careful what trends you follow, what sounds you let echo in your head late at night. You might laugh it off, scroll past, forget about it. But some sounds want to be heard. Some things, once invited in, even passively, through a screen, might just follow you home. And they might not want to leave. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That faint static, just beneath the surface? My name is Sophia. Or, at least, that's the name I answer to, the name on my driver's license, the name Isabella always used. Isabella. Izzy. Saying her name now feels like swallowing shards of glass. She is, my best friend. That term feels so inadequate, so flimsy, like calling a hurricane a stiff breeze. We were forged in the crucible of awkward teenage years, solidified through late-night study sessions fueled by cheap coffee and sheer panic during college, and promised to remain constants in each other's orbits even when life inevitably pulled us into different galaxies after graduation. She went west, chasing a career in graphic design in a city known for its perpetual sunshine and sprawling, anonymous suburbs. I stayed closer to our college town, settling into a junior marketing role in a city characterized by brick buildings and seasons that actually changed. The distance was physical, hundreds of miles of highway and state lines separating us, but it never felt emotional. Not really. Not until that night. One of the rituals we adopted, born from a shared anxiety fostered by too many true crime documentaries and late-night walks home alone from campus libraries, was location sharing. It wasn't born of distrust, quite the opposite. It was a digital tether, a silent promise. I know where you are, you know where I am, just in case. We used one of those standard, ubiquitous apps, the kind built into the phone's OS, simple, reliable. Or so we thought. A little green dot on a map representing the most important person in my world. Most days, I barely glanced at it. It was just there. A background comfort, like knowing the emergency brake in your car works even if you never have to use it. We text random updates, made it home, or stuck in traffic, but the app was the fallback, the silent guardian. It felt sensible, responsible even. In a world that often felt precarious, especially for young women navigating new cities alone. It was a small measure of control, a tiny beacon in the vast, sometimes frightening, darkness. Izzy and I thrived on communication. Daily texts about mundane frustrations, weekend video calls that stretched for hours, sharing triumphs and disasters with equal fervor. We dissected bad dates, celebrated small promotions, debated the merits of pineapple on pizza. She was firmly pro, I remained skeptical, and planned hypothetical future trips we swore we'd take someday. Her life in the sun-drenched city seemed to be taking shape. She loved her job, had found a decent, if slightly isolated, apartment on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, and was slowly building a new circle of acquaintances. She complained sometimes about feeling a bit lonely, the sprawl making casual meetups harder than in our compact college town, but overall, she sounded happy. Content. Settling in. That's why the call was so jarring. It came late, well past midnight my time, which meant it was still reasonably evening for her, but late enough that casual calls were unusual. I was drifting off, scrolling mindlessly through social media, the blue light of my phone painting faint shadows on my bedroom ceiling. When my phone buzzed violently on the nightstand, displaying her name and picture, a goofy selfie from our last visit, my initial reaction was mild annoyance, quickly followed by a flicker of concern. Izzy wasn't typically a late-night caller unless something was up. "Hey," I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "Everything okay?" Silence. Not complete silence, but a heavy, static-filled pause punctuated by what sounded like ragged breathing. My sleepiness evaporated, replaced by a cold jolt of adrenaline. "Izzy? Isabella? Are you there?" Then, her voice, but not her voice. It was thin, reedy, stretched taut with a terror I'd never heard before. It was a whisper, frantic and broken. "Soph. Sophia. Izzy, what's wrong? Talk to me." My heart was starting to pound against my ribs, a frantic drummer setting a panicked rhythm. "He's outside," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush, barely coherent. "Someone." I heard noises. In the garden. By the back. Her apartment was on the ground floor, a small unit with a little patio that opened onto a shared, sparsely landscaped garden area behind the building complex. She complained before about the lack of privacy, the flimsy fence. Okay, stay calm," I said, trying to keep my own voice level, though my palms were starting to sweat. "Are your doors locked? Windows?" Yes, locked. But I saw him. Soph, I saw someone. Looking in the window. Just looking." Her whisper cracked, devolving into a choked sob. "I'm alone. He knows I'm alone." Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a nightmare. This wasn't a joke. This was real terror, raw and unfiltered, pouring through my phone. My first instinct, driven by years of our safety pact, was purely mechanical. While trying to soothe her with platitudes, "It's probably nothing, maybe raccoons, stay away from the windows, call 911, my thumb was already swiping, navigating to the location app. Muscle memory. Check the dot. Confirm she's home, safe inside, despite the fear. The map loaded, the familiar blue dot representing my location glowing steadily. I zoomed out, panning across the country, my eyes searching for her icon, the little green circle that meant Izzy. It appeared. My breath hitched. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. Not even close. Her apartment complex was miles west of where the marker resolutely sat. According to the app we trusted implicitly, Isabella was currently located at a place called the Starlight Diner, a 24-hour establishment situated awkwardly off a major highway interchange, miles away from her quiet residential street. Miles away from the window where she claimed someone was looking in. Confusion warred with the rising tide of fear. Was the app glitching? Had she left frantically and forgotten in her panic? But her whisper, it sounded like she was there, in her apartment, huddled in fear. "Izzy," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, "what are you talking about?" "The app, it says you're at the Starlight Diner. On the highway. Are you there? Did you drive there?" There was another pause. Longer this time. The ragged breathing was gone. The static seemed to deepen, coalescing into something thick and weighty. Then, a sound that was definitively not Isabella's voice slipped through the receiver. It was low, smooth, almost conversational, yet utterly devoid of warmth. A chuckle. Soft, dark, and chillingly amused. It scraped against my ear like nails on slate. "Clever girl," the voice resonated, calm and predatory. But not clever enough. And then, the line went dead. Just click. Silence. The kind of absolute silence that screams louder than any noise. I stared at my phone, the screen still showing her location pin fixed, unmoving, on that damn diner miles from where she was supposed to be, miles from where that voice had just answered. My blood ran cold, the earlier adrenaline replaced by an icy dread that sunk deep into my bones. Something was wrong. Horribly, terrifyingly wrong. The silence left by the deadline was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. For a frozen moment, I just stared at my phone, the bright screen displaying Izzy's location pin mocking me from its fixed point at the Starlight Diner. My mind struggled to bridge the chasm between the terrified whispers of my friend claiming someone was outside her window and the calm, malevolent voice that had answered from her phone, acknowledging a location miles away. Clever girl. But not clever enough. The words echoed in the sudden quiet of my room, curling like smoke, chilling me far more than the late-night air conditioning. Then, the paralysis broke, shattered by a surge of pure, undiluted panic. My thumbs flew across the screen, hitting redial. It went straight to voicemail, an impersonal, synthesized voice informing me the user was unavailable. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I switched to our messaging app, the one filled with stupid memes, heartfelt confessions, and thousands of mundane updates. My frantic messages, "Izzy, answer me. Who is that? Are you okay?" 911. Remained stubbornly marked as sent, not delivered, let alone read. A single gray checkmark of doom. It felt like screaming into a void. My gaze snapped back to the location app. Still there. The little green circle representing my best friend, hovering over a generic map icon labeled the Starlight Diner. I zoomed in, my finger trembling slightly. It was, as the map suggested, an isolated spot. A splash of light and concrete huddled near a sprawling highway interchange, surrounded by dark patches that represented fields or undeveloped land. There were no other houses nearby, no businesses immediately adjacent. It looked like the kind of place travelers stopped at for coffee at 3 a.m., fueled by fluorescent lights and lukewarm regret. Why would Izzy be there? And how could she be there, according to the infallible GPS, while simultaneously whispering about an intruder at her window miles away? I kept the app open, my eyes glued to the screen, half expecting the pin to suddenly flicker and reappear over our apartment complex. Half expecting this whole thing to resolve itself as some bizarre, terrifying technological hiccup. Minutes stretched into an eternity, measured by the frantic pounding of my own heart. I paced my small apartment, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip, glancing at the screen every few seconds. Refresh. Still there. Refresh. Still there. The unchanging location became less of a clue and more of a taunt. It felt deliberate. Planted. Clever girl. The voice knew. It knew I'd checked the app. Was this part of its game? And then, after what felt like a lifetime but the clock insisted was closer to an hour, it happened. The green dot representing Isabella flickered once, twice, like a dying firefly. For a heart-stopping second, I thought it was moving, correcting itself. But then, it simply vanished. Gone. The map was empty, save for my own blue dot. No gray dot icon indicating location unavailable. No last seen timestamp. It was as if she, or at least her digital presence, had simply ceased to exist. Plucked cleanly off the map. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. The screen seemed vast and empty, a testament to my sudden, terrifying isolation from her. That was it. The last shred of hope that this was a misunderstanding evaporated. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't Izzy pulling a convoluted, unfunny prank. That voice, the location discrepancy, the vanishing marker, it was real, and it was deeply, fundamentally wrong. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now, but a different kind of energy surged through me, the grim determination that follows sheer panic. I had to call the police. Not my local police. They couldn't do anything. I needed the police in her city. Finding the non-emergency number for her precinct online felt surreal, my fingers fumbling on the keyboard. Explaining the situation to the dispatcher was one of the hardest things I've ever done. How do you convey existential dread and technological anomalies over the phone without sounding like you've lost your mind? My friend called me. She lives at Isabella's address. She said someone was outside her window, but her location app showed her miles away at a diner. Then someone else answered her phone, a man, and the line went dead, and now her location is gone. I could hear the barely concealed skepticism in the dispatcher's voice, the professionally calm tone that couldn't quite mask the assumption that this was likely a domestic dispute, a drunken misunderstanding, or simple paranoia. Ma'am, are you sure she didn't just go to the diner? Maybe her phone died or she turned off location services? No! I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You don't understand. The voice, it wasn't her. It knew I was checking the app. She sounded terrified. She said she was home. And now she's not answering, and her location just disappeared. I gave them her name, her description, everything I could think of. I stressed that she lived alone, that this was completely out of character. Reluctantly, they agreed to send a patrol car for a welfare check, but the implication was clear. Don't expect much. The wait was agonizing. I paced my apartment, the silence pressing in. I considered calling her parents but couldn't bring myself to inflict this terror on them until I knew something concrete. Every creak of my building, every distant siren, sent jolts of fear through me. I kept picturing Izzy, huddled in her apartment, the shadowy figure at her window. I pictured the green dot hovering over that lonely diner. I heard that low, chilling chuckle. Not clever enough. What did it mean? Finally, my phone rang again. An unfamiliar number with her city's area code. It was the police. My breath caught in my throat. "This is Officer Miller," a tired voice said. "We're at your friend Isabella's apartment. Is she there? Is she okay?" The questions burst out of me. "Ma'am, the apartment is empty. No sign of forced entry on the doors or windows." My heart sank. Empty. "But," the officer continued, his tone shifting slightly, "we found something in the back garden area. Near the fence line." "What? What did you find?" "Her cell phone. A flicker of hope? Is it working? Can you track it?" "No, ma'am," the officer said, and the hope died instantly. "It's been smashed. Looks like it was intentionally destroyed. Screen is shattered, casing is cracked open. Completely unusable. Smashed. In the back garden, where she said she heard the noises, saw the figure. Not dropped accidentally. Destroyed." It painted a sickening picture, a confrontation, a struggle, the deliberate silencing of her only link to the outside world. But why leave it there? Why not take it? And still, the apartment was empty. No Izzy. No sign of a struggle inside. It made no sense. "The diner," I blurted out, remembering the map. "The Starlight Diner off the highway." Her location showed her there for an hour before it vanished. "Did you check there?" There was a pause. "That's quite a ways from here, ma'am. And based on what we found, it seems likely whatever happened here. But the app..." I started, but my voice trailed off. How could I explain? It sounded insane. The officer assured me they would look into it, but the priority was the scene, the missing person report they were now officially filing. I hung up, feeling colder than ever. Izzy was gone. Her phone, our supposed digital lifeline, was destroyed. And the only clue, the impossible location pin at a desolate roadside diner, was likely being dismissed as a technological ghost, a meaningless anomaly. But I knew, with chilling certainty, it wasn't meaningless. That voice knew about the app. The location display, the timing, the smashed phone, it was all connected. And Isabella was caught in the middle of something incomprehensible and terrifying. The guilt began to set in. Should I have believed the voice? Driven towards the diner? Called the police sooner? Done something different? The questions swirled, offering no comfort, only the icy grip of fear and the sickening echo of that final, dreadful chuckle. Days bled into weeks, weeks blurred into months. The initial frantic energy of the search, the missing person posters with Izzy's smiling face plastered online and on telephone poles in her city, the brief flurry of local news interest, the reassurances from detectives, gradually subsided, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. The official investigation, as I'd feared, hit a wall constructed of implausibility and lack of evidence. There were no witnesses to whatever happened at the apartment. No security cameras captured anything useful. Neighbors heard nothing unusual. The check at the Starlight Diner yielded exactly what one might expect: blank stares from overworked staff who served hundreds of transient faces and remembered none, especially not from weeks prior, based on a fake description and a potentially erroneous digital ping. To the police, the narrative solidified into something frustratingly inconclusive. A young woman vanishes from her apartment, leaving behind a smashed phone in the garden. No forced entry, no ransom note, no body, no clear suspect. The location app discrepancy? Attributed to a network error, a GPS glitch, maybe even a deliberate misdirection by Izzy herself before she disappeared. A theory I vehemently rejected but couldn't disprove. The chilling phone call, the voice that wasn't hers. Without a recording, it was just my word, the distraught testimony of a friend hundreds of miles away, easily colored by panic and fear. They were sympathetic, professionally so, but the trail was cold, the leads non-existent. Isabella became another statistic, another unsolved missing person case file gathering dust in a cabinet. But for me, there was no moving on, no acceptance of the inconclusive. I was trapped in the amber of that night, endlessly replaying those final moments. Izzy's terrified whisper. The impossible location pin. The deadline. And that voice. Clever girl. But not clever enough. It haunted my waking thoughts and slithered into my dreams, which became fragmented nightmares of static-filled phone calls, endless highways leading to neon-lit diners, and the feeling of unseen eyes watching me from the darkness outside my own windows. My relationship with technology, once casual and reliant, became deeply fraught. My phone felt less like a tool and more like a potential vector for unseen threats. I disabled my own location sharing, the irony not lost on me. The very feature we'd adopted for safety now felt like painting a target on my back. Who or what had manipulated Izzy's location? How had it known I would check? Had it listened to our calls before? The thoughts sent tendrils of ice down my spine. Every notification jingle made me jump. Every unknown caller sent my heart into overdrive. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself opening the location app, staring at the empty space on the map where Izzy's icon used to be, half expecting, half dreading that it might suddenly reappear, perhaps hovering over some new, terrifying location. Or worse, perhaps right on top of my own blue dot. I became obsessed with the Starlight Diner. Not the physical place. I never gathered the courage to drive there, fearing what I might find, or what might find me, but its digital ghost. I spent hours scouring online maps, street view images, customer reviews, local news archives from the area. It was depressingly, horrifyingly normal. Average reviews, complaints about weak coffee, praise for the late hours. No mentions of strange events, no local legends of disappearances tied to it, nothing that offered any explanation. It was just a place. A banal, unremarkable roadside stop that, for one horrifying hour, had been the anchor point for my friend's digital soul before it was snuffed out. Its very normality felt like a deliberate insult, a mask hiding the abyss that had opened up that night. My life began to shrink. Friends tried to offer support, but their words felt hollow. How could they understand the specific, technologically twisted horror I carried? Their reassurances, they'll find her, try not to worry, maybe she just needed space, felt like papering over a chasm. Even Izzy's devastated parents, caught in their own unbearable grief, seemed to focus on the tangible, the police reports, the search efforts, while I was haunted by the digital phantom, the voice on the line, the detail that defied logical explanation. I grew distant, withdrawn, the shared trauma isolating me instead of bringing me closer to those who also mourned her. I felt like I was guarding a terrible secret, the secret that Izzy hadn't just disappeared. She'd been taken by something that understood the tools we used to feel safe and had turned them against us. What was it? What kind of entity could mimic a voice, manipulate GPS data, know to destroy the phone only after ensuring I saw the false location, and then vanish without a physical trace? Was it human? A terrifyingly tech-savvy stalker who somehow compromised her phone? Or was it something else? Something older, stranger, that wore technology like a skin? The voice hadn't sounded entirely human. The amusement in it felt cold, alien. The memory of that chuckle still makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. Not clever enough. It implied a game, a hunt, and Izzy. Izzy had been the prey. And I, the witness, inadvertently confirming to the predator that its trick had worked, right before it cut the line and erased her. Years have passed now, though the exact date, April 26, 2025, is seared into my memory. Isabella is still missing. The official case remains open but inactive. Hope has withered into a scar, a constant, dull ache in my chest. Sometimes, I force myself to look at her picture, the goofy selfie from my phone contacts, trying to reconcile the vibrant young woman I knew with the terrifying whispers and the empty space on a digital map. I live a cautious life now, double-checking locks, wary of unfamiliar numbers, forever glancing over my shoulder. The world feels thinner, less solid, as if the ordinary reality I once knew could glitch and dissolve at any moment, revealing the predatory static underneath. I still have the location app on my phone. Sometimes I open it, tracing the highways between my city and hers, zooming in on that unremarkable diner off the interchange. It's still there, a tiny icon on a vast map, open 24 hours. A beacon in the dark. Or perhaps a lure. I never stop wondering what truly happened that night, who or what answered Isabella's phone, and if it's still out there, watching, waiting, perhaps scrolling through its own contacts, looking for another connection, another little green dot on a map. Waiting for someone else to prove not quite clever enough. My name is Lucas, and I used to have this habit. Maybe compulsion is a better word. It wasn't anything illegal, not directly, but it certainly wasn't healthy. I was drawn to the shadowed corners of the internet, specifically the dark confession forums lurking within the labyrinthine structure of Reddit. You know the ones, subreddits where anonymity cloaks users like a shroud, allowing them, encouraging them even, to unburden themselves of their deepest, most shameful secrets. People admitting to awful things, truly awful things, infidelity, theft, betrayal, things that gnawed at their conscience until they had to spill them somewhere, anywhere, even if it was just into the digital void, read by strangers like me. Why did I frequent these places? Morbid curiosity, I suppose. That's the simplest explanation. There's a perverse thrill in peering into the abyss of human nature, witnessing the raw, unfiltered thoughts people usually keep locked away. It was like rubbernecking at a car crash, but instead of twisted metal, it was twisted morality on display. part of me felt superior, maybe. Reading about these transgressions made my own mundane life, my own minor flaws, seem insignificant in comparison. Another part, the part I'm less proud of, just found it fascinating. The psychology of it all. What drives someone to do these things? What does it feel like? And perhaps most importantly, how do they live with themselves afterward? These forums were a raw, uncensored look into that struggle, or sometimes, the disturbing lack thereof. I'd spend hours scrolling, clicking through post after post, each title all promising some new depth of human depravity. I ruined my best friend's marriage and feel nothing. I stole from my dying grandmother. I fantasize about hurting animals. Most were probably exaggerated, some surely fabricated for attention, the digital equivalent of shouting into a canyon hoping for an echo. But some felt real. Too real. They had a weight to them, a texture of genuine remorse or chilling detachment that fake stories rarely capture. The details would be specific, mundane even, anchoring the horrific admission in a reality that made it all the more unsettling. It was these posts that kept me coming back, the ones that lingered in my thoughts long after I'd closed the browser tab. One particular evening, fueled by cheap coffee and the ambient glow of my monitor in the otherwise dark room, I stumbled upon a post that snagged my attention more forcefully than usual. It was in one of the grimmer confession subs, a place known for stories that often blurred the line between disturbing fantasy and potential reality. The title was simple, almost banal, I Can't Stop Watching. The username attached was Regretful Watcher 88. Intriguing enough. Plenty of posts started like this, vague hooks leading into common confessions. I clicked, expecting another tale of obsessive online stalking or perhaps voyeurism from a distance. What I found was different. It was written with a chilling lucidity, a calm narrative tone that felt jarringly disconnected from the content. Regretful Watcher 88 wasn't confessing to cyber-stalking or watching strangers in a park. No, this was far more invasive, far more terrifying. The user described, in meticulous detail, the act of repeatedly breaking into someone's house. Not to steal, not to vandalize, not even to interact with the occupant. The sole purpose, the confessed compulsion, was simply to watch the resident sleep. The narrative unfolded with unnerving precision. Regretful Watcher 88 recounted the process, the careful observation beforehand to learn the target's schedule, the identification of a weak entry point, a loose basement window, apparently, the meticulous steps taken to avoid detection, soft-soled shoes, dark clothing, waiting for the dead of night when the house was still and the streetlights cast long, concealing shadows. The user wrote about the adrenaline rush, the fear of discovery mixed with the powerful, illicit thrill of transgression. They described the feeling of standing inside someone else's private space, unseen, unheard, a ghost in their sanctuary. But the truly chilling part was the description of the watching itself. Regretful Watcher 88 wasn't just glancing in. They were studying their victim. They wrote about the quiet intimacy of the act, observing the rise and fall of the sleeper's chest, the occasional twitch or mumble, the vulnerability of unconsciousness. The post detailed the layout of the house with an unnerving familiarity, the path taken from the entry point, through the darkened living room, up the stairs, avoiding that specific creaky floorboard just outside the bedroom door. The writer mentioned knowing the exact pressure points on the floor, the geography of silence within the dwelling. It read like someone describing their own home, but from the perspective of an intruder. The details were disturbingly specific, painting a vivid picture not just of the act, but of the environment. The faint scent of laundry detergent in the hallway, the precise angle needed to peer through the slightly ajar bedroom door without casting a shadow, the way the moonlight filtered through the blinds, striping the floor and the bed. It was invasive, violating, and utterly captivating in the most dreadful way. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach as I read, the usual detached curiosity replaced by a creeping sense of unease. This wasn't just a confession, it felt like a blueprint for terror, a meticulously documented violation. The user even described the victim, a male, roughly the same age as the watcher, who lived alone. He mentioned the victim's habits, clean from observation, the late hours kept, the tendency to leave a specific bedside lamp on, the way he always slept facing the window. Even at this point, reading these intimate, stolen details about a stranger's life felt deeply wrong. It crossed a line. This wasn't just someone confessing to a past mistake, this felt current, ongoing, predatory. The username, RegretfulWatcher88, suddenly seemed less like an admission of remorse and more like a hollow label, a flimsy attempt to rationalize an active, terrifying obsession. The lack of any expressed desire to stop, despite the regretful moniker, was perhaps the most disturbing element. It was a confession, yes, but it didn't read like a plea for absolution or help. It read like someone documenting their horrifying hobby, perhaps even reveling in the power it gave them, the ultimate secret knowledge they possessed about their unsuspecting target. The post felt heavy, dangerous, like holding a loaded gun. And as I continued to read, scrolling down paragraph after paragraph of these intimate, chillingly specific observations, a deeper, more personal dread began to bloom in the pit of my stomach. Because some of those details, those specific, mundane, terrifying details, they sounded familiar. Too familiar. The unease I felt reading Regretful Watcher 88's post wasn't just the standard revulsion I sometimes experienced in those forums. It was different, colder, more intimate. It started subtly, a prickle of déjà vu. The description of the house layout, the path from the basement window, up the back stairs, it mirrored the route someone could take in my own rented house, if they knew about the slightly warped frame on the old cellar window I kept meaning to fix. I'd always dismissed it as unlikely, too awkward an entry point. But reading it laid out so clinically, so confidently, sent a shiver down my spine. Then came the mention of the specific floorboard outside the bedroom door. My breath hitched. There was a floorboard. Right outside my door, maybe the third one from the frame. It had a particular groan, a high-pitched whine if you stepped on it just wrong, especially late at night when the old house settled. I avoided it instinctively, stepping over it even in the dark. Everyone who lived here long enough learned to. But how could this anonymous poster know? It could be a coincidence, I told myself. Houses have creaky floors. Lots of houses have basements, stairs, bedrooms. My mind scrambled for rational explanations, trying to push back the rising tide of dread. But the details kept coming, piling up like stones on my chest. The victim's habits. Living alone, check. My age group, check. Keeping late hours. Well, yeah, I was a notorious night owl, often working or just browse online until the small hours, just like I was doing right then. The bedside lamp? I glanced over at the cheap lamp on my nightstand, the one with the slightly flickering bulb I kept forgetting to change. It was on, casting a warm, localized glow. I did often leave it on, preferring its soft light to the harsh overhead fixture if I woke up thirsty or needed the bathroom. Minor things, easily observable if someone was, say, watching the owls from the outside. But Regretful Watcher 88 wasn't watching from outside. They claimed to be inside. And then, the detail about how the victim slept, facing the window. My blood ran cold. I sleep on my right side. My bed is positioned so that when I sleep on my right side, I face the large window that looks out onto the quiet street. It's just how I've always felt comfortable. How could they know that? It's not something visible from the street level, not with the blinds partially drawn as they always were. To know that, you'd have to be in the room. Standing there. Watching. The image flooded my mind, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of my bedroom, motionless, their eyes fixed on me while I slept, vulnerable and unaware. My heart was hammering against my ribs now, a frantic drummer signaling alarm. I scrolled back up, rereading the description of the room itself. Vague mentions of furniture placement felt unsettlingly accurate, but then came the line that made my stomach plummet. He described the posters on the wall. My eyes darted around my own room, scanning the familiar images tacked onto the plaster. A vintage horror movie poster for a film most people had never heard of. A faded band poster from a concert years ago. A stylized print from an indie graphic novelist. Not exactly mainstream decor. Could Regretful Watcher 88 have possibly described these? The post didn't list them by name, thankfully, just alluded to posters showing dark themes, fitting for the occupant. It was vague enough to maybe be a lucky guess, but specific enough, combined with everything else, to feel like a targeted blow. My room wasn't just being described, it felt like it was being judged, analyzed by this unseen intruder. I was trembling, scrolling frantically, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. A collection of commonalities twisted by my own paranoia, fueled by the inherent creepiness of the forum. Maybe this Regretful Watcher 88 just lived in a similar house, had similar habits, knew someone like me. It was possible, wasn't it? The internet is vast, overlaps happen. I clung to that thought, a flimsy shield against a mounting terror. And then I read the line that shattered everything. The final, irrefutable, sickening detail. He even has that small, pale scar just above his left eyebrow. Looks old. Maybe from childhood. I froze. My hand instinctively flew up to my face, fingers tracing the thin, slightly raised line of skin just where my eyebrow began to arch. It was pale. It was old. I got it when I was 7, fell off a swing set onto a jagged rock. It wasn't prominent. Most people never noticed it unless they were looking closely, or unless the light hit it just right. It wasn't something you could see from across the street, or even across a room, unless you were close. Unless you were standing over someone, perhaps, while they slept, the moonlight catching the subtle imperfection. There was no coincidence anymore. No plausible deniability. This wasn't about someone like me, in a house like mine. This was about me. This anonymous user, Regretful Watcher 88, wasn't just confessing to breaking into a house, they were confessing to breaking into my house. Repeatedly. They were confessing to standing in my room, navigating my space, learning my habits, studying my face while I slept, close enough to see the intimate detail of a childhood scar. The world tilted. The air felt thick, unbreathable. The glow from the monitor seemed suddenly malevolent. Every shadow in my room seemed to deepen, coalesce. Was he watching now? Could he somehow see my reaction through the screen? The paranoia was instant, overwhelming. My sanctuary, my private space, had been breached, violated in the most insidious way imaginable, not for gain, but for the simple, terrifying act of watching. Who was Regretful Watcher 88? Someone I knew? A stranger obsessed? The username offered no clues, just mockery. Regretful? There was no regret in those meticulous descriptions, only a chilling pride in his stealth and observation. The 88-foot, was it a birth year? Maybe mine? Maybe his? It didn't matter. The anonymity of Reddit, the very thing that allowed these confessions, now felt like a suffocating mask hiding a monster who knew my face, my home, my vulnerabilities. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My only instinct was to sever the connection, however tenuous. My fingers flew across the keyboard, clumsy with panic. Settings. Account. Deactivate account. Confirm password. Are you sure? Yes. The screen refreshed. My profile vanished. My posts, my comments, my connection to that dark corner of the internet, gone. As if that could somehow erase what I'd read, or lock the doors Regretful Watcher 88 already knew how to open. It was a meaningless gesture, a digital scream into the void, but it was all I could do. I slammed my laptop shut, the click echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was charged, heavy, listening. He knew my room. He knew my scar. He knew the creaky floorboard just outside my door. And deleting my Reddit account wouldn't change any of that. Deleting my Reddit account felt like slamming a door shut, but the monster was already inside the house. That first night after reading the post was the longest of my life. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old house settling, every rustle of leaves outside the window, every distant car engine was magnified, distorted, potentially signifying him. Was that the loose basement window rattling, or was it being deliberately jimmied open? Was that scrape the branch of the oak tree against the siding, or soft-soled shoes on the roof? My own home, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, had transformed into a hostile environment, every shadow a potential hiding place, every sound a possible footstep. I sat on my bed, laptop closed, lights blazing, clutching a heavy kitchen knife I retrieved with trembling hands. It felt absurd, theatrical, but the fear was primal, overriding logic. He knew my schedule, knew my habits. He knew I was alone. He knew I slept facing the window. He knew about the scar. He knew me. The thought circled endlessly. He could be back tonight. He could be outside right now, watching me react. By dawn, exhaustion warred with adrenaline, leaving me a jittery, hollowed-out wreck. There was no question of staying. The illusion of safety was shattered beyond repair. I called my parents, my voice tight with suppressed panic, feeding them a half-truth about feeling unsafe in the neighborhood, a recent spate of break-ins, anything but the full, unbelievable horror story. They were confused, concerned, but agreed immediately. Pack a bag, come home. The relief that washed over me was immense, but tainted by shame and lingering terror. I felt like a child running back to mommy and daddy, But the alternative, staying another night in that house, waiting, listening, was unthinkable. Moving out was a blur. I threw essentials into bags, abandoning most of my belongings. Each trip out to my car felt like exposing my back to an unseen sniper. I kept scanning windows, rooftops, parked cars, seeing potential watchers everywhere. Leaving the house felt like shedding a skin, but the contamination lingered. I didn't look back as I drove away. The next day, I hired movers to clear the rest, instructing them remotely, unable to stomach setting foot inside again. Back in my childhood bedroom at my parents' place, surrounded by relics of a safer past, the fear didn't magically dissipate. It just changed shape. It became less immediate, less tied to that specific house, but broader, more insidious. We installed new locks, reinforced the doors and windows. I insisted on security cameras, multiple cameras covering every angle of the property, feeding directly to a monitor I kept by my bed and an app on my phone I checked obsessively. Motion-activated floodlights bathed the yard in stark white at the slightest provocation, a stray cat, a falling leaf, the wind. My parents thought I was overreacting, traumatized by the vague notion of neighborhood crime I'd fed them, but they indulged me. They didn't know the real reason for my vigilance, the specific, named fear that haunted me. Regretful Watcher 88. Weeks turned into months. I avoided the internet, especially Reddit. The morbid curiosity that had once drawn me to those dark forums was extinguished, replaced by a deep-seated aversion. The thought of willingly peering into that abyss again made me physically ill. I tried to rebuild a semblance of normalcy, got a new job, reconnected with old friends. But the experience had left an indelible mark, a psychological scar that mirrored the physical one above my eye. I became jumpy, suspicious. A stranger's prolonged glance on the street, a car idling too long outside the house, a floorboard creaking upstairs when I thought I was alone. Mundane occurrences now triggered a spike of adrenaline, a cold echo of that night. Trust felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. How could you ever be sure who was watching, what secrets they held, what lines they were willing to cross under the cloak of anonymity? I never saw another post from Regretful Watcher 88. Of course, I wouldn't have. I deleted my account, fled that online space. But I couldn't help wondering. Did he stop? Did reading my frantic digital escape somehow satisfy him, or scare him off? Did someone else read his confession and report him? Or did he simply grow bored of me, his regret proving entirely superficial as he moved on to document the sleeping habits of a new, unsuspecting victim? Or perhaps the most chilling thought, did he find me again? Did he know where I was now, watching from a new distance, amused by my security cameras and floodlights, knowing he'd already breached the walls of my mind? There was no closure, just a gaping void of uncertainty where the fear festered. The cameras offer a fragile sense of security, a technological ward against the unseen. But technology can be bypassed. Locks can be picked. And psychological wounds, those are harder to heal. The paranoia became a low hum beneath the surface of my daily life, always present. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is settling and the world outside is quiet, I hear it. Or maybe I imagine I hear it. A faint sound, barely audible, from the hallway outside my old childhood bedroom. A sound unnervingly similar to the specific, whining creak of that third floorboard outside my door in the house I fled. Is it just my traumatized mind playing tricks, phantom sounds born of fear? Or is it something else? A message? A reminder? I tell myself it's nothing. Houses make noises. My parents' house is old too. But the cold dread that washes over me is always the same. I check the camera feeds, scan the empty hallway, hold my breath, listening. Listening for the silence that follows, or for the sound to come again, closer this time. I deleted my Reddit account. I moved houses. I installed cameras. But I can't shake the feeling that regretful Watcher 88, or the terror he imprinted on me, is still there, lurking just beyond the floodlights, just on the other side of the door, forever watching from the shadows he created in my own head. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear that floorboard creak.